Chapter 54:18. When Dou Fengmian and Dou Fenghua saw this, they hurriedly said, "We'll go help too." Then they turned to look at their third sister, Dou Fengqi, and walked out with Qi Xianxian and the others. Although Dou Fengqi was unwilling, she did not dare to refute her brother's words. She stole a glance at Arbor and followed them out with a drooping mouth. Once they walked out of the door, a gust of wind blew. A rotten stench mixed with the wind blew straight at his face. Through the defensive array, they could see over 1,000 strangely shaped zombies blocking the door. One after another, they dug at the defensive barrier, making continuous thumping sounds. Qi Xianxian hooked her finger at Little Fatty and whispered into his ear. Little Fatty Ko Hongwen nodded and turned to wave at Ma Ta. "Brother, you two go stand guard over there. Brother Duanmu, go to the left. Xianxian, open a door on the defensive barrier later and let them in." When Dou Fengqi was inside, she always wanted to diss Arbor. Now that she was out, she did not need to care about the Crown Prince anymore. She suddenly mocked, "Open a door? Open what door? This defensive array can't hold on much longer. If you dig another hole in the middle, you won't be able to defeat those zombies one by one. If the defensive barrier collapses when the ones outside swarm in, it will be too late." Qi Xianxian and the others completely ignored her. After discussing among themselves, they nodded and went to stand at their respective positions. When Dou Fengqi saw this, she could not help but make her presence known. "Hey, didn't you hear what I said? Third sister." Dou Fengmian glared at her warningly. Dou Fengqi was gloomy and shut her mouth in embarrassment. For the Crown Prince's sake, Big Brother told her to restrain herself from dissing the Crown Princess. However, these people were merely some of the Crown Princess friends. What was so bad about dissing them? Big Brother was too careful. In any case, their Dou family was not a small family in the Divine Continent. She was the third miss of the Dou family branch, so why couldn't she say a few words? And what she said wasn't wrong. The defensive barrier was already on the verge of collapsing. If Qi Xianxian and the rest continued to act recklessly, it was only a matter of time before it collapsed. Under the pressure of so many corpse puppets, everyone might not be able to bear the consequences. The corners of Dou Fengqi's mouth drooped as she looked coldly at the backs of Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty. His eyebrows suddenly twitched. The two of them moved nimbly and jumped forward without saying a word. The double-headed hammer in Little Fatty's hand smashed a hole in the defensive barrier in front of him. Qi Xianxian, who was standing beside Little Fatty, hurriedly threw out a defensive talisman to reinforce the defensive barrier. In the blink of an eye, a zombie bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws jumped into the hole with a bang. "Kill." Qi Xianxian raised her hand and commanded. Mata, who was standing on the right, flew forward with a long spear in his hand. With a crash, he sent the corpse puppet's head flying. The degree of perfection of this coordination was just right. It was done in a single breath without any changes in the middle. The second zombie stepped on the corpse of the first zombie and jumped in. Qi Xianxian shouted again, "Kill." In a matter of minutes, it was finished off by the Azure Mist sword on the left. Duanmu Qin kept his sword and looked at the hole in the defensive barrier expressionlessly. At this moment, 2 to 3 zombie puppets rushed in from the hole. They did not even need Qi Xianxian to give any orders. Chapter 54:19. The two young masters from the Dou clan twitched their mouths. They hurriedly released 2 wood spirits to bind the corpse puppets together. Everyone raised their weapons and swarmed forward. With a few strikes of their swords, sabers, spears and hammers, these unlucky corpses were all taken care of. Dou Fengqi was dumbstruck. She probably didn't expect these people to be so shameless. They even purposely left a door for the corpse puppets to pass through so that they could swarm over and beat them up. After an hour, they really did take care of several hundred corpse puppets. Duanmu Qin took out several cups of spirit tea from his inner world and gave them to his companions to replenish their strength. Glancing at the 2 young masters from the Dou clan who worked hard, the Duanmu brothers reluctantly offered them a cup as well. After drinking a cup of spirit tea, Qi Xianxian felt her entire body relax. Her body had mostly recovered. In the past, when she drank this spirit tea, 1 cup was enough to completely recover her energy. However, now that they had all ascended to the deity realm, the spirit tea could not completely replenish their lost divine power in the first place. However, drinking was better than nothing. Once they recovered, everyone felt that they could fight a few hundred more corpse puppets. However, Qi Xianxian scratched her head and glanced outside the door. Am I hallucinating? Why do I feel that those things aren't stupidly squeezing in? It's not a hallucination. After drinking a cup of spirit tea, young Master Dou's energy recovered quite well. He instantly looked at the Duanmu brothers gratefully and hurriedly said, "These corpse puppets aren't coming in." Preposterous. Qi Xianxian let the two hidden guards clean up the corpse puppets. When she said clean up, she meant to melt or burn those rotting corpses on the spot. Otherwise, with several hundred corpse puppets blocking the door of the defensive barrier, how could they attract other corpse puppets in? However, now that the corpses were properly cleaned up, those corpse puppets outside all hesitated and didn't gather near the door. Instead, they scattered to the side. However, they didn't leave. Instead, they roared at the mayor's residence through the defensive barrier. Arbor and Emolien walked out. Seeing that half of the corpse puppets were gone, they nodded and asked, "Did you catch any alive?" Qi Xianxian shook her head. As soon as these things rushed in, they bared their fangs and brandished their claws. It was really unsightly. None of them showed any mercy when they attacked. Do Fengqi suddenly snorted from the side. "Here." He stretched out his leg and kicked something covered in rotten flesh in front of them. This person's original appearance could not be seen at all. His four limbs were tied up with ropes and he could not walk at all. He could only roll around like a ball. Arbor glanced at Do Fengqi and nodded. He pointed his finger across the air, and the raging flames bombarded the corpse puppet's neck. The corpse puppet roared and opened its mouth wide. Arbor took advantage of this gap and opened the bottle with a finger, pouring half of the second stage antidote into the corpse puppet's mouth. Ow, 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 ow. The corpse puppet seemed to be in great pain, rolling on the ground and howling. Arbor didn't give him a second glance. He waved his hand at the secret guard beside him. "Take him away and watch over him." He reckoned that this antidote would have a little effect on a corpse puppet that had been in the corpse state for a long time. Otherwise, how could he be in so much pain? He hoped that this effect was good. He also hoped that the antidote developed in the third stage would have an obvious effect on people who had turned into corpses. Chapter 54:20. Jojo, Qi Xianxian said indignantly. Qi Xianxian said indignantly, "I realize that some of these corpse puppets also have brains. Look at those outside. They're blocking the way and won't come in." Qi Xianxian pointed at half of the zombies scattered far away outside the defensive barrier. "Let's charge out and fight." Arbor muttered to herself for a moment before helping them inspect the defensive armor on their bodies. She nodded and said, "These zombies must be completely cleaned up. If one were to be released, it would only harm more people outside." The Crown Prince had instructed the hidden guards to do this, so they naturally stepped up their efforts to check if there were any zombies that had charged out of this village. If they weren't careful and zombies broke into their residences, then it would be a very troublesome matter. There were only a few hundred zombies left, so it wasn't a difficult task for everyone. At the young Crown Prince Consort's signal, everyone ran out like a swarm of bees. Do Fengqi harumphed and jumped outside with everyone, following Qi Xianxian and the others into the zombie horde. Arbor and Emolien followed them out, occasionally kicking the zombies that pounced in front of them and sending a beam of divine power over to rescue Do Fengqi, who was besieged by several zombies. He took a leisurely stroll outside the house. The little stoic rubbed her chin. "There must be more zombies gathered at the ruined temple. We have to think of a way to deal with them as soon as possible. Otherwise the sky will be bright if we dawdle." They had to think of a way to eradicate all the zombies around Jiaoguang base today. Tianyun and the others were truly shameless, releasing so many zombies in the outskirts of the capital all at once. Xiao Mu's small stoic face was cold as she slowly walked through the zombie horde. She abruptly halted her steps and swiftly turned her head. She swiftly sliced open the air in front of her and took out a thunderclap sword from her inner world. Without another word, she slashed at the head of a zombie behind her. An earth-shaking roar startled Qi Xianxian and the others, who were fighting fiercely with the zombie horde. He quickly turned his head and saw that His Highness the Crown Prince had already flown up and stood in front of Jojo to block the big-headed corpse puppet's claw. This was truly a big-headed zombie. Its head was the size of a millstone, and its pair of small eyes were squeezed into its face. It was so ugly that it was simply unbearable to look at. Do Fengqi was startled. She turned around and found that the big-headed zombie was originally standing diagonally behind her. If it wasn't for the Crown Princess' sudden attack, the big-headed corpse puppet might have attacked him first. Do Fengqi's face immediately turned pale, and she couldn't help but take a few steps back. "I say, how can there be no leader among the zombies?" Arbor coldly muttered to himself. He stretched out his hand to touch the lightning on his sword and casually threw it over. The thunderous explosion landed on the big-headed corpse puppet's body. The corpse puppet let out two angry roars as it was struck by the lightning bolts. However, it didn't fall and remained standing upright. He suddenly moved. His swift speed was almost comparable to a bolt of lightning. The big-headed zombie's crawling movements didn't resemble that of a human. Instead, it resembled an animal like a leopard. Its four limbs were on the ground and its movements were extremely swift. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Arbor and clawed at her leg. Emolien sneered. Without waiting for Arbor's sword to land, a burning black flame landed on the big-headed zombie's claw. With a whoosh, the flame suddenly burst out. Chapter 54:21. The big-headed corpse puppet was suddenly attacked by the black flames. Its entire claw was engulfed by the black flames. It howled and trembled uncontrollably. Arbor looked at him in surprise. Logically speaking, as a walking corpse puppet, it shouldn't be able to feel anything. Therefore, the trembling of his body should be it was instinctively afraid of the purest black sacred flames in the world. Emolien didn't have any intention of talking to it. Her black flames had reached perfection, and every move she made was a death sentence. Zhaoguang didn't know how many corpse puppets had gathered at the ruined temple base. Hopefully the situation wasn't too bad. As Xiaomu thought this, she saw Emolien draw out a heavy raven moon and send the big-headed zombie's head flying with a swing of his sword. The rest of the corpse puppet's body flickered in and out of existence in the black flames for a while before it finally turned into a pile of ash and disappeared. At the same time, Hades Ba led thousands of secret guards into the thatched forest and gathered near the group. Arbor glanced at them and quickly ordered Qi Xianxian to take out the protective armors from the storage talisman and distribute them to everyone. This is only a small portion of the corpse puppets. There might be more inside, Emolien said softly. Wear the protective armors on the ship. Protect yourselves as much as possible. Give it your all. For the safety of the imperial capital, we must fight to the end. The secret guards raised their arms and roared a few times. Then they followed the crown prince and crown princess and ran towards the back of the hill outside Maolin town. The ruined temple was right in front of them. It was already daybreak. This was also Arbor and Emolien's arrangement. They deliberately avoided the dark night and waited at the entrance of the town for the entire night before taking action at dawn. The situation inside the ruined temple base was unknown. They needed to be fully prepared. Protecting the lives of the people was indeed the most important task. However, the thousands of secret guards and soldiers who came with them couldn't lose their lives for nothing. Everyone followed the crown prince and crown princess and ran all the way to the ruined temple at the back of the mountain. They slowly came to a stop a few hundred meters away from the temple. Half of the red sun was shining on the horizon, and a faint red glow of dawn was gradually spreading out over the mountains and plains. In Arbor, Emolien led her group of companions and the secret guards to the back of the hill. They looked at the empty and ruined temple in front of the door with solemn expressions. Xiaomu said hesitantly, "There's actually not a speck of a zombie here." With such an abnormal situation, everyone knew that there was definitely something fishy going on. A gust of cold wind blew in his face, and he felt that the surrounding atmosphere was a little gloomy. Dou Fengqi could not help but raise her hand to rub the tiny goosebumps that appeared on her arm. She forced herself to calm down and said in her heart, "I think there should be something strange about this damned place. It's better to be cautious." Dou Fengmian nodded and turned to look at the crown prince and crown princess. "I'm afraid it's inappropriate for the two of you to rush in like this. What do you think?" Arbor glanced at her husband and even hinted at him with her eyes. Emolien couldn't help but laugh. He patted his wife's head in passing and released two golems, coldly giving them an order. These two golems were Fan Xiuha and Fan Gu, who had their souls extracted and transformed. Like Luigi, the two of them had been turned into golems by Emolien using extreme methods. The more dangerous and difficult the place was, the more they would be forced to go and suffer misfortune. Chapter 54:22. By now, Emolien had already ground away the last strand of consciousness that these people had left. Currently they were wrapped in copper skin and turned into mechanical puppets. Like walking corpses, they only obeyed their master's orders. These two mechanical puppets weren't slow, and one of them jumped all the way into the rundown temple. Arbor looked up and asked absent-mindedly, "What happened to Fangu's leg?" "Who knows?" Emolien also looked indifferent. "She probably hurt herself when I sent them out to do something last time. What an idiot. She can't even handle such a small matter." Qi Xianxian and the rest were a bit puzzled, and they silently glanced at the crown prince. From what they knew, the crown prince had made many mechanical puppets, but he seemed to treat a few of them rather badly. The big treasure he gave Jojo was noisy all day, but the couple didn't seem to dislike it. How would they know that there really was a knack for this? Luigi and the rest were truly mechanical puppets that had been refined into human puppets. They were neither alive nor dead and had suffered all kinds of pain and torture until now. Arbor had only asked casually and nodded when he heard the Crown Prince's words. The group quietly waited outside the rundown temple for news. After Fangu and Fanchoha, the two mechanical puppets, went in, they didn't move at all. Half an hour had passed as the sun rose high in the sky. Emolien couldn't help but frown. So useless. Arbor nodded and released several poison-tailed butterflies with a wave of his hand. He let the little butterflies go in to take a look first. They were small and didn't attract too much attention when they flew in from the corners. The main reason was that it was completely empty outside, which was a little surprising. They originally thought that the inside and outside of this rundown temple would be completely surrounded by zombies, but unexpectedly, not a single zombie could be seen. It was indeed very strange. After a moment, Arbor received information from the poison-tailed butterflies. There's no one inside. Arbor turned to look at Emolien, who was standing beside him. Fangu and Fanchoha, those two things are also gone. Two such large mechanical puppets had inexplicably disappeared without a trace. This situation made everyone even more vigilant. What did this mean? This meant that there was definitely a powerful force hidden in this dilapidated temple. The two mechanical puppets were quietly dragged to an unknown place. There was definitely something strange going on in the depths of this dilapidated temple. Arbor glanced at the dilapidated temple and snorted coldly. She exchanged glances with her husband, who turned to look at her. The two of them nodded at the same time. Arbor raised her hand and 3 spirit stone cannons appeared beside her. A few hidden guards swiftly went up. Under the young Crown Prince Consort's nod, they loaded the spirit stones one by one and pushed the spirit stone cannon 100 meters forward. He suddenly turned the muzzle of the cannon, and after a few rumbling sounds, the entire door of the ruined temple was blasted flat by the spirit stone cannon. The temple door was wide open, and a burst of smoke rose from all directions. The earth and rocks in front of the door had completely collapsed, revealing a large, dark hole. Looking in from here, he could see that the stone floor of the ruined temple had been bombarded by the spirit stone cannons. There were several rows of holes, and there were faint flames floating out from them. Arbor raised her hand and waved it, sweeping away the faint smell of smoke in front of her. Continue. Emolien looked at the entrance of the ruined temple and calmly gave the order. Thus, the secret guards once again took out handfuls of spirit stones and threw them in. The muzzle of the cannon was aimed at the earth and brick walls on both sides of the ruined temple. Qi Xianxian and the others couldn't bear to look at it. Chapter 54-23. This couple was truly the same kind of pit. How could the dilapidated temple, which was already on the verge of collapse, withstand this kind of devastation after several rounds of bombardment from the spirit stone cannons? A loud boom came from afar. The entire dilapidated temple collapsed, raising a cloud of dust and dirt. Sir Jojo expressionlessly watched everything before him. After waiting quietly for a while, the commotion over at the dilapidated temple gradually calmed down. She then pulled along Jojo's lotus and strolled forward. She took out a fan from her inner world and waved it here and there, brushing away the dust in front of her eyes. The little fatty and the others who followed behind her were simply about to die from laughter. Zhaoguang seemed to have been tricked a bit miserably this time. Sir Jojo had sent people to raise their old nest to the ground with the spirit stone cannons. Everyone filed up the dilapidated temple in a single file. Emolien suddenly took out a staff from his inner world, and everyone looked at him in bewilderment. They watched as that handsome banished immortal, who shone like the sun, moon and stars, expressionlessly poked at the pit in front of him with the staff, then poked at the ground in front of him. Everyone, why not? His Highness the Crown Prince was inexplicably down to earth like this. There should be a secret passage here. Emolien used the staff to knock on the ground buried by the soil, and a hollow knocking sound came from below. The little stoic said in understanding, "They just like to dig rat holes underground. Evidently this place is no exception. Move away some of this soil and rocks." At the Crown Prince's command, several hidden guards ran forward and pushed away the rubble that filled the ground. They revealed a square cover with a red copper ring in the middle. Prince Mo used the staff to push the ring down and muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "It seems that the real Zhaoguang base should be below here." Fan Qiuha and Fangu, these two mechanical puppets, were most likely dead by now. Arbor glanced at the Crown Prince, and the latter nodded slightly at her. When the two secret guards received the signal from His Highness, they quickly walked forward and activated their defensive spiritual tools. Their expressions were slightly grave. The two of them reached out at the same time, each of them holding the red copper ring and pulling it up with all their might. Chi, a soft sound was heard, and a wisp of faint white smoke seemed to float up from the ground. Fortunately, Arbor was already prepared. He sprinkled a handful of powder, and the white mist immediately dissipated. When the cover was completely pulled away, a long and gloomy staircase was revealed. There seemed to be thousands of stone steps that led to the depths of the earth. A putrid smell wafted out from inside, and everyone couldn't help but cover their noses. Dou Fengqi's expression became extremely ugly. It's so smelly, there definitely won't be anything good down there. Fengqi, go back to the Dou clan and report this. Ask the patriarch to bring some people over to help. Dou Fengmian suddenly turned around and said to her third sister. Dou Fengqi hesitated for a moment, but you guys, you ba, take 100 men and guard the entrance. Yes. The rest of you follow us down, the crown prince said coldly. Activate your defensive spirit artifacts. The little stoic had just taken a small step when her husband pulled her to his side and held her small hand. Follow behind me, he whispered softly to her. The little stoic raised her hand and slapped several defensive talismans on him before slapping several on herself. Then she handed a handful of defensive talismans to the others. Be careful. Everyone entered in a single file and walked down the stairs. The further down they went, the more suffocating they felt. A putrid smell assailed their noses, and the stench was overwhelming and extremely unpleasant. Chapter 54-24. Xiao Mu and the others hastily and stealthily blocked off their five senses, repelling that suffocating stench. Qi Xianxian subconsciously held onto little Fatty's arm and followed him down a few hundred steps. The group in front of them suddenly stopped. Qi Xianxian and the others immediately prepared themselves for battle. They raised their vigilance and focused their attention on the front. They saw that the stairs were winding down, and there seemed to be no end in sight. However, Arbor stopped and took out a dozen bottles of medicine to give out a round of pills. The poisonous fog here is thicker. Take the medicine first before going down. Hearing this, everyone nodded and passed the pills one by one. Everyone took an antidote in advance. Then the group followed Arbor and Emolien down the stairs. After about half a quarter of an hour, the group saw various stone sculptures appear at the end of the long staircase. They thought to themselves that they had probably reached the end of the staircase. As expected, when Arbor saw the harpy sculptures that represented the existence of heavenly luck, he knew that they had finally found the proper entrance to the base. Xiao Mu stumbled when she stepped on something round and bulging. She hastily grabbed Emolien's arm and steadied herself. The two of them looked down at the same time and saw a pitch-black metal arm scattered on the ground. Emolien frowned and looked down. It's half of Fangu's elbow. Arbor raised his delicate eyebrows. It seemed that it was just as Jojo's lotus had predicted. Fangu and Fanshoha, these two little puppets, were probably completely done for. What a pity. Sir Jojo smirked mockingly. There were thousands of sufferings in life, and they had not experienced all of them yet. The two of them walked along a stone path that flickered with fire. They saw that there were sculptures of harpies in various poses on both sides of the path. Two half-open stone doors stood in front of them. Emolien's footsteps paused as he exchanged glances with his wife beside him. The two of them looked up at the stone doors. There were two neat rows of words carved on them. If you want to change this world, you have to change yourself first. Little Fatty looked up at the stone carvings and could not help but snort. This leader of heavenly luck is quite arrogant. Every time he opened his mouth, he could change the entire world. It seemed that he was acting like a savior of the world. Arbor was about to step through the stone doors when he suddenly felt a grip on his wrist. He was pulled behind Emolien. At the same time, dozens of dirty zombies suddenly came out of the stone doors and pounced on them without a word. A few of the secret guards leaped up swiftly and blocked the crown prince and his wife's path to face the dozen or so zombies. In the blink of an eye, the two sides were on the verge of fighting. A few of the secret guards were slightly more aggressive. They slammed the corpse puppet against the stone door, causing two dull thuds to ring out. The stone doors suddenly swung open to both sides, as if attracted by a huge force, and heavily stuck to the walls on both sides. Arbor turned his head and looked over. He could not help but be startled. A young man walked out of the stone doors. He had a dignified face and his face was slightly old-fashioned. There were wrinkles between his eyebrows. It seemed that he had been frowning for a long time. His eyes were grayish-white. When he looked up at people there was a chilling feeling. Arbor's intuition told him that this person was somewhat familiar. He could not help but be alarmed. It was not his first time dealing with zombies, but the one in front of him seemed to be different from the ones he had seen before. 8 o'clock ended. Chapter 54:25. Qi Xianxian involuntarily tightened her grip on the purple treasured sword. She was on guard as she stared intently at the person who walked out of the stone door. This ash-colored eyeball was intimidating, so it definitely wasn't a pure object. Little fatty Ko Hongwen subconsciously walked forward and stood in front of Xianxian. He sized up this person with his beady black eyes and scratched his head. He looks a bit familiar. He indeed looks a bit familiar, Arbor inwardly thought. However, she couldn't recognize who this person was for the time being. Jojo reflexively looked at her husband for an answer. With her husband's photographic memory, he would definitely know who this person was if he had seen him before. Medicine King Island's young island master, young Master Wei Suwei. Emolien's expression flickered, and she lowered her head to meet Arbor's eyes. He said softly, "Do you still remember Jojo? We met him at the palace gates. At that time, this person was misled by Ni Hanji and came to make trouble for you." Later, Jojo testified on the spot that Ni Hanji's master, His Excellency He Wen, was killed by her own vicious methods. Wei Suwei received 3 lashes of the whip in public and brought Ni Hanji back to Medicine King Island to be punished with the heavenly punishment of destruction. Her husband's memory was truly very good. After Sir Jojo explained the entire sequence of events, the little stoic immediately understood and nodded repeatedly in astonishment. So it's him. No wonder he looked so familiar. He really was an acquaintance. Back then, both husband and wife had a pretty good impression of this young island master of Medicine King Island. Although this young island master indiscriminately brought a group of Medicine King Island's disciples to the palace to make trouble for them, in the end, he was only deceived by Ni Hanji. Afterward, he realized his mistake, apologized, and was even willing to be punished. Most importantly, he even gifted Jojo a 9 abyss spiritual fruit. Currently, this fruit was flourishing in Jojo's portable divine realm. The 9 abyss spiritual fruit was a divine rank medicinal fruit. It was sparkling and translucent like a grape, but its color was light gold. After consuming it for a long period of time, it would greatly increase one's divine power. However, in the eyes of Arbor and his group of foodies, it wasn't important whether or not they could level up. The fruit tasted great. Later on, in midsummer, it would be even more crispy and delicious after being chilled. The water content would be excellent, and it would definitely be a sacred product for cooling down. Right now, Sir Jojo's star sector had planted a vast expanse of fruit trees. Everyone was in for a treat now that summer had arrived. "Jojo," the little fatty whispered to her, "then are we going to fight or not?" Since he was someone Jojo knew, shouldn't he be more polite to him? However, looking at the current situation, that young island master Wei Su seemed to have completely turned into a corpse. Arbor pursed his lips and looked at Wei Su, feeling an indescribable pain in his heart. When he first saw this young master Wei Su, although his face was stiff and unsmiling, at least he was still a living person. He was the young island master of Medicine King Island. Tianyun's hand is really long. Qi Xianxian gritted her teeth. Even the young island master of Medicine King Island couldn't avoid being killed by them. How hateful. "Be careful," Emolian instructed calmly. She lowered her head to look at Arbor and held his small hand. "Jojo, don't worry." Arbor clenched his fist and said in a low voice, "I won't be soft-hearted." Right now, in front of them was a rank 3 special class corpse puppet. Chapter 54:26. This was no joke. If he slacked off a little, this special grade zombie might harm his family and friends. No matter how much she sympathized with this young Master Wei Su, she couldn't be merciful to him. Since things had already come to this point, then Wei Su couldn't stay any longer. As the dignified young master of Medicine King Island, if he still had some sanity left at this time, he would certainly not want to become a walking corpse and be willing to become Tianyun's lackey. Xiao Mu turned her head to meet Emolien's eyes before giving him a slight nod. Emolien immediately opened her inner world and took out Raven Moon. Without any explanation, she thrust it straight at the neck of the young master of Medicine King Island. Wei Su's figure suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Arbor jerked his head up and looked up. His scalp tingled slightly and he subconsciously shouted, "Disperse." Wei Su had unknowingly moved to the top of the stone wall and suddenly swooped down with extreme speed, a claw directly tearing at the little fatty's head. Clang! In the blink of an eye, the little fatty took out a black pot lid from his inner world and quickly blocked Wei Su's claw. With Wei Su's claw, a crack appeared in the pot lid. The little fatty was so frightened that he hurriedly opened the pot lid to take a look and angrily cursed. This was a spirit tool he had plundered during his training. Although it was only a pot, it had been with him for a long time. Before he met Jojo and the others when he was training alone in Shantian Prefecture, it was all thanks to this pot's accompaniment. But now this pot's lid had cracked just like that, and it was even torn apart by that rank 3 zombie's claw. His heart ached for the little fatty. At that time, Mo Lian's crisscrossing sword energy had already reached Wei Su. When Wei Su's figure disappeared again, Arbor pursed his lips and immediately used the strand of time energy stored in his body. Wei Su's figure that was just about to disappear suddenly paused in the air for a few seconds. Until that sword chi ruthlessly hit his body. Wei Su's entire body was thrown out, and he slammed hard into the stone door behind him. Only then did he realize that he had been hit hard by someone. Wei Su crawled up from the ground with difficulty. Her grayish-white eyes looked in the direction of Arbor and Mo Lian with slight confusion. She subconsciously took a few steps back. Mo Lian whispered to Arbor, "He may still have a little bit of consciousness left." However, this weak consciousness was no longer of any use to Wei Su herself. Most of his mind had already been controlled, and his entire mind was probably in a muddled state right now. Arbor clenched his fists tightly, pursed his lips, and coldly looked at Wei Su, who was struggling to get up from the ground. Out of instinct, Wei Su felt that the two people in front of him were not to be trifled with. He had no idea what had just happened. Actually, Jojo had used that bit of time energy to slow down time for a few seconds. And it was during this period of delay that Crown Prince Mo cooperated exceptionally well, swiftly sending Wei Su flying with a hack. He had solved the little fatty's predicament, and also struck Wei Su hard. However, the young island master no longer felt any pain. After he got up from the ground in a daze, he raised his hand to support his broken arm and straightened it. Mo Lian couldn't help but narrow her eyes and look Wei Su up and down. She whispered to Arbor, "Be careful." Chapter 54:27. Looks like this zombie puppet's level might have broken through to the godly realm, Mo Lian said with a serious expression. Arbor nodded with a stoic expression. This zombie puppet can actually teleport. It's probably a new skill it obtained after becoming a zombie. Although the range of each teleport was not large, it was fast and could be used multiple times. At least from Arbor's point of view, this special rank 3 zombie puppet was comparable to a Mystique Venerable Realm expert in terms of movement and speed. Wei Su's cultivation level was definitely not low when he was alive. After becoming a zombie and going through multiple transformations, his current strength was not to be underestimated. The underground passage was narrow, so Arbor naturally could not use the Spirit Stone cannon to bombard it. If the passage collapsed, he and Jojo's Lotus would have to eat a mouthful of dust. Just thinking about it was annoying. "He's trying to run." The little fatty with a bowl cut suddenly shouted as he followed behind the two of them. Lu Yu and the others looked at him and could not help but facepalm. This guy had an iron pot lid on his head, which made him look rather comical. As soon as the little fatty finished speaking, Mo Lian grabbed Arbor's hand and ran toward the stone door. When the others saw this, they hurriedly followed and rushed into the stone door. This young island master probably left some brains. Qi Xianxian ran with the others and could not help but say, look at him, he seems to be afraid of the Crown Prince and Jojo. He's running away." Everyone wanted to laugh when they heard this. However, Xianxian's narration was quite vivid. The zombie puppet was running away. It ran in a crooked manner as if it was in a hurry. It looked like it really wanted to get rid of Mo Lian and Jojo as soon as possible. Unfortunately, those two were very difficult to deal with. They were the ones who tricked others all day long and were never tricked by others. It would be extremely difficult for the corpse puppet to break free from the two of them. "Husband, quick, use the spirit locking rope." Her husband had a spirit locking rope in his hand, so no one could escape. Her husband had taken it back from the 17th floor of the Tower of Punishment. After he had improved it many times, the current god locking rope could probably lock up anyone below the transcendent god realm. Hearing this, Mo Lian hurriedly took out a black iron chain from her inner world and threw it out without saying a word. The chain was originally only the size of a palm, but after it was flung away by Mo Lian, it extended for about 100 meters with a whoosh. Like a lasso, it wrapped around Wei Su tightly in an instant. The pitiful Wei Su had been running forward when this ornament suddenly appeared on his neck. his body was dragged forward and his head smashed onto the ground, falling down. Arbor quickly stepped forward and added 10 gravity talismans to the corpse puppet without saying a word. Everyone watched as the zombie puppet, which had just gotten up, fell head first onto the ground with a thud. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly said to the secret guard behind him, "Tie it up and bring it back." She wanted to see if capturing Wei Su, a rank 3 special class zombie, would incur the wrath of the entire Tianyun Empire. The more they captured, the better. When the time came, they would deal with all these high-level zombies and see if they could extract anything useful from them to speed up the production of the antidote. Wei Su was completely incurable now, but perhaps in the near future, they would be able to save more Wei Su. Arbor clenched his fists and took a few steps forward. At this time, the group had already entered the stone door. Chapter 54:28. Inside and outside the door was a completely different world. If the stench from outside was said to be nauseating, then inside the stone door was the long-awaited hell on earth. Cages were placed on the wall, and each cage held 7 to 8 people. Some of the cages were hung high on the dome and most of them were hung on the wall. In the large space, there were 20 to 30 cages, and hundreds of people were imprisoned here. Some were missing arms and legs and some were on the verge of death. Some were old and clumsy and their eyes were cloudy. Young people with drooping heads and lifeless bodies could be found everywhere. Arbor and the others looked around and couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Qi Xianxian held the little fatty's arm tightly and followed him a few steps forward. She couldn't help but feel a little panicked. These people. Arbor's face was calm, and he reached out to release the old mayor. He said in a low voice, "Uncle, go up and identify them." The old mayor was already stunned by the scene in front of him. He shakily reached out and called out the names of the cages one by one. For a moment, he beat his chest and stamped his feet, and tears flowed down his old face. It seemed that the people imprisoned here were all Mausoleum Town residents who had recently been absorbed into the bright light and were undergoing continuous transformation. Arbor sighed slightly and he felt a little melancholy in his heart. If these people could be a little more vigilant and be a little more vigilant, perhaps the outcome wouldn't be like this. How could there be such a good thing in this world? The bright light took advantage of everyone's fear and used a holy fruit to deceive them into joining the bright light. Unfortunately, they didn't use their brains to think carefully. Even if the bright light really had holy fruits, would the number of holy fruits be enough for them to use? Would they be able to afford the cost of using the holy fruit? The old mayor suddenly fell to the ground and said with a mournful face, "Crown Princess, can they be saved?" Arbor said with a heavy heart, "It's not clear yet. We need to let people check one by one to know. If they haven't completely turned into corpses, perhaps there is still a way to save them." The old mayor sat on the ground in a daze, and 2 lines of old tears flowed down his face. Mausoleum Town had more than 100 families, and everyone was very familiar with each other. There were more than 100 families in the town, and most of them were related by blood. Now, seeing all his relatives and friends become like this, the old mayor was filled with sorrow. Mata stepped forward and patted the old mayor's back. "Old man, let me help you sit over there for a while." The old man had suffered such a huge blow that his mood was on a roller coaster ride. He was afraid that he would pass out at any time. Mata helped him to a clean place to sit down. Arbor raised his hand and called several shadow guards over, whispering a few words in their ears. She turned to Emolien and said, "I'll let Huang He and the others take over here. See if you can help them." Emolien nodded. She was also in a bad mood. She pulled Arbor and walked towards Wei Su, who had fallen to the ground and was restrained by the spirit sealing rope. At this moment, Wei Su was tightly bound by the god sealing rope and was struggling with all his might. Seeing the 2 fiends walking over, Wei Su roared furiously and struggled against the god locking rope that bound him. However, the god locking rope could be big or small, loose or tight. The more he made a fuss, the more it wrapped around him. Wei Su shook his head and roared twice, glaring at the 2 of them fiercely. That pair of gray, lifeless eyes stared unblinkingly at the husband and wife. Chapter 54:29. A hint of anger flashed through Emolien's eyes. Look, these people who used to live normal lives were now ruined by Tianyun. Wei Su was like this, and so were all the townspeople of Maolin Town. Just how many people was Tianyun going to harm before they were willing to give up? Roar. Wei Su let out a deep roar from the depths of his throat, and his limbs suddenly contracted. The god-locking rope also suddenly contracted around his body. Arbor raised his eyebrows slightly and stared at Wei Su's sudden bone-shrinking appearance. He hooked a stream of water spirit energy between his fingers. Could it be that the young island master of Medicine King Island also obtained a special ability before he turned into a corpse? Something like a bone-shrinking skill? She suddenly released a strong stream of water spirit energy towards the person in front of her. In the blink of an eye, Wei Su suddenly jumped up from the ground. He couldn't get rid of the god-locking rope binding his body. After all, the god-locking rope was a divine weapon made by Mo Lien. Could be long or short, big or small. No matter how his bones contracted, the god-locking rope couldn't possibly let him escape without Jojo's Lotus Divine Sense undoing it. However, Wei Su's current appearance was indeed a little strange. Although his body was bound by the god-locking rope, his hands became longer and turned outwards under the chains. His two deformed hands grabbed towards Arbor's neck. The water spirit that Xiao Mu released was struck by the fire spirit that Wei Su flicked out, and the two spirits formed a powerful current in midair. Then they separated upon contact, flickering and extinguishing like fireworks. Mo Lien frowned slightly. She flashed in front of Jojo and used her sword to knock away the deformed and elongated left hand that was rushing towards Jojo. Looking at Wei Su's left hand now, it was completely different from a normal human's hand. The collision just now was like hitting an iron plate. It was so solid that it was surprising. Mo Lien couldn't help but frown again and glanced coldly in Wei Su's direction. This Wei Su, after turning into a corpse, could still use the fire spirit box. It was indeed unexpected. Arbor also noticed this. Therefore, a rank 3 special zombie puppet was completely different from other zombie puppets. It was probably close to becoming a perfect zombie. Therefore, it was a little difficult to deal with it. Arbor tossed over several binding talismans. The light of the talismans flowed and formed a binding talisman array around the corpse puppet, firmly fixing it within. At the same time, Mo Lien flicked his wrist and wrapped the spirit-locking rope around his two arms. As such, the ends of the 3 god-locking ropes were held in place by the 3 young hidden guards. Even though Wei Su had immense strength after his mutation, he was still like a trapped beast, completely unable to move. Wei Su kept struggling and twisting his body, howling and screaming. The old mayor, who was sitting paralyzed on the side, had long been frightened by the scene in front of him. He couldn't even speak. This was simply too terrifying. Who would have thought that these ignorant villagers would actually change into such a terrifying monster after joining Zhaoguang? His whole body trembled slightly and he couldn't help but shrink back. Seeing this, Mata turned around and comforted him. "Don't be afraid, old man. This corpse puppet is already under control. It won't jump out to harm people again." The old mayor nodded fearfully and wiped away the tears in his eyes. He sat there absent-mindedly, staring blankly at the corpses of the townsfolk locked in the earth cage. With a glance, he discovered that his daughter-in-law and 2 nephews were also locked in the cage. Chapter 54:30. Thinking of his young grandchildren asking about their mother's whereabouts, the old mayor couldn't help but cry. When his daughter-in-law went to Zhaoguang to ask for holy water, they all tacitly agreed. He didn't expect that his stupidity would harm his family and his 2 children, causing them to lose their mother's care. On the other side, when Huang He rushed over with the members of the Heavenly Pill Association, it was already half an hour later. This stone room had been slightly cleaned by the secret guards. They took down all the cages hanging on the wall. Now, the 20 to 30 cages were neatly placed in the stone room. The surroundings were illuminated by several fist-sized luminous pearls, making it as bright as day. Xiao Mu walked up to greet Huang He and the others. She then pointed at Wei Su, who was bound by the 3 spirit sealing ropes. "It's a special class rank 3 zombie. We have already subdued him." "Is Mr. Su here?" A middle-aged man quickly walked forward and bowed. "Greetings, Crown Princess." "Greetings, Your Highness." "Mr. Su, you don't have to be so polite." Arbor nodded slightly at him, then took out a box from his inner world and handed it to him. "I heard that you're already in the middle of the 3rd stage of the antidote experiment. I, the Crown Princess, have created a kind of recovery potion here. I wonder if I can help you." In fact, this potion was created by the little Crown Princess grinding a holy fruit and adding a few herbs to dilute it. The little tree had already borne more than a dozen holy fruits. Although it was many times faster than in the past, the speed of the results was many times faster. However, compared to the many zombies in the world, a mere dozen holy fruits really couldn't help much. Moreover, Lord Jojo had her own selfish motives. She couldn't use all kinds of methods to hasten the growth of the little tree that had accompanied her until now. She also couldn't selflessly contribute all the holy fruits to the world without reservation. There were only a dozen holy fruits in total. At a critical moment one could save a life. Naturally she still wanted to use it for her friends and comrades. She could only say that she would do her best to help Fairy Huang He, Mr. Su, and the others make the antidote. This kind of diluted recovery liquid may be of great help to Mr. Su and the others in refining the 3-stage detoxification liquid in the future. However, if it wasn't of much help, she could only help and obtain another saint fruit to test the medicinal liquid. Mr. Su couldn't hide his excitement. He reached out and took the box of medicine from the little crown princess. Opening the box, he saw 2 neat rows of small potion bottles stacked neatly inside the box. There were a total of 20 bottles. Mr. Su quickly nodded and said, "Crown Princess, don't worry. I will do my best to carry out the 3rd stage of the antidote test with Fairy Huang He as soon as possible." Arbor nodded in relief. She trusted Mr. Su. After all, he was someone that JoJo's Lotus valued. Not only was he smart and courageous, he was also proficient in the art of formations, mechanisms, elixirs and talismans. He was not an ordinary person. Fairy Yellow Crane took a step forward and looked at the surroundings. Her expression was serious. "Jojo, these people?" There were actually 200 people here, and from the looks of it they had all been passively transformed. The auras on these people were faintly discernible, and there was no sign of life. Mo Lien waved her hand and released the townsfolk of Maolin Town from the storage talisman. Once everyone came out, they quickly shrank in a corner and saw the scene in front of them clearly. Chapter 54:31. They wailed and wailed, looking like they wanted to approach the wooden cages but did not dare to. Mo Lien said indifferently, "You can go over and say your goodbyes. At least 90% of the people here can't be saved." He had only glanced at them indifferently. More than 90% of them were corpses. Only about 10% of them seemed to have the aura of living people. It was unknown if the antidote could pull them back. As soon as the Crown Prince said that, the townsfolk stumbled over and cried out in pain through the wooden cages. The scene of life and death parting made one's heart ache a little. Even though Arbor was used to such scenes, he still found it hard to bear. He turned around and sighed softly. Fairy Yellow He and company could not help but sigh as well. They looked sympathetically at the wailing crowd. If Tianyun had not been so ruthless and caused so much trouble, how could these townsfolk have lost so many of their loved ones in one night? Tianyun is too hateful. A young female alchemist clenched her fists in anger and could not help but shout. Huang He sighed and nodded slightly at a man beside him. "Are the carriages and horses ready? Move these cages onto the carriage and send them back to our experimental base first." Fairy Yellow He and Mr. Su had set up an antidote experimental base in the outskirts of Sovereign Capital. Now all the things they talked about were related to that place. More than 90% of the Heavenly Pill Firm's members had gone to the base in the outskirts. Only 10% of the alchemists remained in the city to continue running the Heavenly Pill Firm. Although Yellow He sympathized with the townsfolk who were separated by life and death, he still had to finish what he had to do as soon as possible. If he could extract the corpse poison from these people as soon as possible, he could analyze it faster. It would further advance the development of the antidote. If these corpse puppets were to be graded, the corpse poison content of the special class corpse puppets was the highest. Just a casual touch could turn a person into a corpse in a matter of minutes. Under the persuasion of Yellow He and Mr. Su, the townsfolk finally walked out of the stone door while grieving and supporting each other. They watched as the wooden cages were moved out and placed on the carriage. The sound of the carriage wheels gradually faded into the distance. The townspeople of Maolin Town, from top to bottom, all had extremely blurry eyes. They knew very well that they would never see each other again after today's parting. Perhaps a few of them could be saved, but that was only a sliver of hope. His return was uncertain and difficult to find. Sir Jojo stood there with a cold expression as he watched the trussed-up Wei Su leave. He even ordered 10 hidden guards to follow him. After all, even though Wei Su had been subdued, his strength still remained. The safety of the people in the Heavenly Pill Firm naturally had to be ensured. Mo Lien saw her solemn expression and hurriedly walked up to her. She gently tugged at her little hand. "Jojo, don't be sad, okay? Everything will slowly get better. After we deal with the matters here, we will meet up with Duan Yu and the rest." At present, Duan Yu had already led his men to the vicinity of the kingdom of Qingzhou. According to his message, he suspected that the headquarters of the Heavenly Fate Organization was most likely in Qingzhou. But that was to be expected. Qingzhou was located outside of Tsang Province and Ming Province, so it had always abided by the law and paid tribute every year. If it weren't for the sudden news of the Heavenly Fate Organization being conquered, No one would set their sights on such a small kingdom. Chapter 54:32. However, Qingzhou was only so big. Could it be that Tianyun had built another underground base in Qingzhou? That made sense. After all, it was a method that Tianyun, this group of people who loved to dig rat holes, would often use. If someone were to come and tell him that the entire underground area of Qingzhou had been requisitioned by Tianyun's people and built into an underground palace, he would be shocked. Emolian really wouldn't feel the slightest bit surprised. From the Crown Prince's point of view, the way Tianyun and his people did things was just that standard. Arbor took a deep breath and turned to meet the Crown Prince's eyes. His expression couldn't help but be a bit weary. Let's go back. Sapling said earlier that he didn't sense any information from the fragment. I suspect that the last fragment should have been moved away by someone. Since Xiaoguang was Tianyun's lackey, then she definitely had reason to suspect that this holy wood fragment might be a pretense that family head Qin used to tease her. Now, it was very likely that the fragment had been taken back by family head Qin. So this place couldn't be found at all. The fragment might still be in family head Qin's hands. Thinking about it, such an important thing couldn't just be thrown to Mu Jingfeng's group. Family head Qin would definitely firmly grasp it in his hands. Jojo was very displeased that they couldn't find Qiuqiu's last fragment. His head drooped listlessly, and he was a bit unhappy to speak. Emolian couldn't help but laugh when she saw this. She raised a hand to rub his head and softly said, "All right, don't be uncomfortable. Qiuqiu's fragment naturally belongs to our Jojo. It will roll back sooner or later." Arbor thought that was true. The holy wood had a spirit even if it was just a small fragment. It must also want to return to its master's side as soon as possible. "Jojo, let's go back to the city first." This place was filled with the stench of blood and it was truly nauseating. Needless to say, Arbor didn't want to stay here for a long time. Hearing this, he nodded at Emolian and she reached out to lead him up the stone steps. When the group exited the underground passage and finally returned to the surface, they couldn't help but exhale. Everyone couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. They felt that the unpleasant smell of blood that lingered in their noses had finally faded a lot. Arbor recalled Qi Xianxian and the rest and turned to look at the three people from the Dou clan. These three people had helped them quite a bit along the way. Even Dou Fengqi, who was usually very annoying, seemed to be much more responsible in front of an extreme organization like Tianyun. Prince Mo expressed his gratitude, causing the Dou brothers to feel somewhat fearful. After all, with His Highness's current status, there was no need for him to be so courteous with them. After the three Dou clan members left, Emolian summoned Little Seven and carried Arbor onto the dragon's back, flying towards the inner city. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived at the Eastern Palace. The two of them were preparing to return to the palace hand in hand to wash up and catch up on sleep. Hu Dequan, eunuch who had been waiting for a long time, ran over with a bitter face. With a round and fat face, he smiled and said to the two of them, "Your Highness Crown Prince, Crown Princess, this old servant has the Empress instructions. If the two of you return, please make a trip to Madame Goen's residence." The two of them looked at each other in dismay. What happened? Hu Dequan's face was full of smiles. He didn't dare to offend this troublesome couple in front of him at all. This servant heard that Madame Goen was assassinated. Chapter 54:33. The young couple looked at each other and saw a trace of disapproval in each other's eyes. Hu Dequan's heart couldn't help but beat like a drum when he saw that the two didn't speak. Eunuch who stealthily glanced at the two little fiends and said in a low voice with an obscure expression, "Your Highness Crown Princess, if the two of you feel a bit tired and want to rest a bit before going, that's fine. This old servant can wait outside the door." Eunuch who wanted to burst into tears. Why did His Majesty and Her Majesty keep having him provoke these two little fiends? Couldn't they send someone else? Arbor cast him a glance, a bit perplexed as to why this old eunuch's expression was so rich. The little stoic said with a stiff expression, "Lead the way." Hu Dequan was taken aback, but he quickly agreed and repeatedly said okay. He hastily turned around and hurriedly walked outside while shouting, "Why aren't you quickly preparing the carriage? It's freezing outside, so add a few hand warmers inside the carriage." The little stoic crown princess didn't have much of an expression as she was led out of the Eastern Palace's main entrance by Prince Mo. When they boarded the carriage, the little stoic asked icily, "Is it your emperor who suspects that the crown prince and I killed that madam of the Ministry of National Security overnight?" Hu Dequan almost fell head first onto the ground. He naturally didn't dare to reply and hastily shook his head while saying, "You're wrongly accusing me, Crown Princess. His Majesty treats the two of you with fatherly love, so he definitely wouldn't suspect you." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the Crown Prince and Crown Princess both staring at him expressionlessly. Hu Dequan almost bit his own tongue and he wanted to cry even more but had no tears. The Emperor always made things difficult for him. He always threw him, a lackey, into the crevice and had difficulty breathing to survive. It was truly very sullen for him to always be pressured by the Crown Prince and Crown Princess and live a tight life. Hu Dequan saw that the two of them didn't say anything else. After they boarded the carriage and lowered the curtains, the old eunuch finally raised his sleeve to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead as a chill ran down his spine. Oh my God, this really made people feel a little scared. This Crown Princess didn't look like she had much to say on a normal day, but it couldn't be helped that she was more intelligent than others. Once he opened his mouth, everything he said was accurate. Wasn't it because the great emperor courted death by thinking that the death of the madam of the Goan family had something to do with this bastard couple? Speaking of which, Hu Dequan also believed that the death of Madame Goan might be related to the Crown Prince and his wife. After all, the young Crown Princess and Madame Goan had a deep grudge against each other. Although their relationship had eased a lot recently, it was only because Madame Goan did not seek trouble with the Crown Princess. But what if the Madam of the National Security Agency returned to her old ways and made the little Crown Princess unhappy again? No one knew if something else had happened between the two of them. Speaking of which, after the Crown Princess returned from the River of Forgetfulness, it seemed that her days were not peaceful. Every day was extremely thrilling. Previously, the City of Shadows had just attacked them, but now they had destroyed the entire City of Shadows with the power of lightning. Sometimes Tianyun would make a move and sometimes the Qingzhou Kingdom would fall. Previously, the people of Zhaoguang were about to do something in the imperial capital, but later they were arrested and imprisoned by the Crown Princess. The imperial court raided one house after another every 2 or 3 days, causing everyone to be in a state of panic. Everyone looked at the Crown Prince as if he was a fiend. Their days were miserable. Chapter 54-34. Things seemed to have calmed down quite a bit recently, but Madame Goan had suddenly died in her residence. Strange things were happening every day. As a servant, he couldn't help but be on tenterhooks as he sat in the depths of the palace. It was hard to say when something would happen in the depths of the palace. Eunuch who walked in front of the carriage and stole glances at the carriage through the curtain from time to time. Although he knew that he couldn't see the movements of the two people in the carriage, Eunuch who couldn't help but glance in their direction. Madame Goan's residence wasn't in a remote area. After passing through Changle Street and detouring to the neighboring street, they arrived at their destination in no time. The junior eunuchs rushed forward to help the Crown Princess. But the young Crown Princess waved her hand and leaped to the ground, walking towards the main entrance. She didn't need anyone to help her. It wasn't as if she was missing an arm or a leg. Emolien caught up with her in amusement and asked in a low voice, "Jojo, are you angry?" "Humph." The young Crown Princess rolled her eyes and complained softly, "When something happened, your father's first instinct was that it was us who did it. Why do you think he would think that?" The Crown Prince had a profound expression on his face. He rubbed his chin and nodded, saying, "Maybe he thinks that Goan has an unsettled feud with us?" Arbor wagged a finger at him. "That's not the reason. It's your father who thinks that we're scammers." Arbor pointed out without batting an eyelid, "It's not the first time he thinks that we're scammers. Whenever there's a slight disturbance, he'll easily link it to us." Emolien? His wife's words seemed to make sense. The Crown Prince pursed his lips and reached out to hold his wife's small hand, muttering, "How are we scammers? Most of the time we're very reasonable with people." Arbor nodded in agreement. "That's right, we've never scammed people." Eunuch who had followed the two through the door, almost tripped over the high threshold. He really wanted to ask the two nobles in front of him, "You two have probably long forgotten about all the things that happened in the past, right?" Hand in hand, the young couple stepped through the door and were led to the central courtyard by the servants. After entering the arch of hanging flowers, they saw a corpse covered in a white cloth lying at the bottom of the long corridor. Bai Wuxia was leading the head palace maid, Pearl, and the others to sit in the small pavilion opposite. When she saw the two of them approaching from afar, she stood up and walked down from the small pavilion. She smiled and greeted them, "Emolien, Jojo, you're here. Come and help Imperial Mother take a look. This Goan's death is a bit strange." "Nyang Nyang." Jinju hurriedly went forward and reminded her in a small voice. The Empress suddenly thought of something and hurriedly pulled Arbor's hand. "Goan died in an undignified manner. His entire body is somewhat. The Empress thought for a long time and finally told the truth. My whole body was cut up. If you don't like it, you don't have to look at it. Arbor, on the other hand, became curious after hearing the Empress's explanation. Goen's wife was actually so pitiful? Not only was she assassinated in her residence, but her entire body was also cut up? How much hatred and resentment must there be to make Her Majesty so embarrassed to talk about it? Arbor's curiosity was piqued. He held the Empress's hand and said, Imperial Mother, Jojo is not afraid. Bai Wuxia smiled and nodded repeatedly. He had to mentally prepare his daughter-in-law first. Chapter 54:35. Otherwise, when she lifted the white cloth and saw Goen's appearance, she would be frightened. From the beginning to the end, Empress Bai had never considered whether she would scare her son. In her opinion, her son was a man. If he couldn't even see this little bit of blood, how could he protect his wife and children in the future? The Empress asked someone to remove the white cloth covering Goen's body. The young couple took a look and couldn't help but gasp. The person who came was really good. It was rare for them to see such a badly mutilated corpse. Goen's body was really incomplete from top to bottom. Especially that face, it could almost give people nightmares. The face in front of them couldn't see Goen's original appearance at all. His entire face had been dug out, leaving behind only a few terrifying holes. Arbor couldn't bear to look and turned his eyes away. He thought to himself, who did Goen provoke? Even after her death, she can't be left in peace. Bai Wuxia sighed and said in a low voice, and this is after cleaning. You didn't see it at first. Bai Wuxia shook his head and said, her whole body is bloody. There's a piece missing from her body. It's fine if she's missing an arm or a leg. Her face has been dug out like this. If it weren't for a few bold women helping to clean it up, the corpse would be even more incomplete. That person must have a lot of hatred for her. Not only did she dig out her eyes, but she also made her unable to see in the netherworld. She also cut off her ears and nose, making her lose her 5 senses. In the end, she even sealed her mouth with a ball of mud. When Bai Wuxia said this, he couldn't help but sigh faintly. This is to make Goen unable to reason even if she goes to the netherworld and sees the king of hell. The little crown princess couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and say something conscientious. There's no such thing as hatred for no reason in this world. There's cause and effect first. Madam can't blame others for her current state. The corners of Prince Mo's lips curled up slightly. He knew that his little wife would scold anyone she saw, even if it was her mother, who she had a good relationship with. As a little wife who had a bottom line of justice in her heart, she would side with reason and not family. Bai Wuxia was stunned. He secretly glanced at his daughter-in-law's expressionless face and secretly found it funny. She quickly nodded and followed Jojo's words. It's not that I sympathize with the National Security Agency, I'm just a little sad. After all, ever since Gwen became her father's adopted daughter, she had Glory City to take care of her. Her days had been pretty good. Then Bai Wuxia became the Empress of Shenzhou. She became the Empress's sworn sister openly and was given the title of Madam of the National Security Agency. She lived a carefree life like a fairy. As long as she didn't cause too much trouble, she would be able to live a carefree life without worrying about food and clothing for the rest of her life. Your Highness. A hidden guard hurriedly ran over and whispered a few words. Bai Wuxia's expression changed slightly. He frowned and asked, how many people? I estimate that there are more than 10 of them. They're all locked up in the cellar at the back. Some of them look like they're about to die. Empress Bai coughed softly and subconsciously glanced at her daughter-in-law. Seeing the little fellow's expressionless face, his heart began to beat faster for no reason. Cough. Then why hasn't anyone mentioned this before? Goen is really outrageous, Empress Bai said. Release them first, then pacify them properly. The little expressionless had already heard it clearly. She said expressionlessly, she kidnapped a man and hid him at home. Chapter 54:36. Others must also have nowhere to seek redress for their grievances. For relatives like this who bully others, I would have dealt with them 800 years ago. It was impossible to allow them to jump up and down until now. Arbor continued coldly, this person is so disgusting she should be punished. The Crown Prince hurriedly nodded, yes. Families have family rules and countries have national laws. Go and arbitrarily detain people in the cellar at home, which is a violation of national laws, and must be severely punished. White Empress, The Empress now felt a little empathetic and understood His Majesty's feelings. The son was completely from the wife's country, and whatever the wife said was right. This was really worrying. Goan was already dead, how could they punish her? We must seize Goan's title and confiscate all her assets. The Crown Prince's handsome face was cold as he said righteously, part of it will go to the national treasury. Part of it will go to the victim's family. Comfort the victim's family. When the young Crown Prince Consort heard this, she nodded in full agreement. Her small face was taut. The Crown Prince is extremely right. Mother, you mustn't shield them for the sake of Glory City's and grandfather's face, unable to differentiate right from wrong. White Empress, actually it's not that serious. The old steward of Goan's residence couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. He knelt on the ground and cried out, Her Majesty is Madame's foster sister and has accompanied Madame for decades. Hearing this, the little Crown Princess was furious. You're still playing the sympathy card at this time. The old steward hurriedly cried out miserably, but Madame is now dead and died in such an undignified manner. If this matter is made public, first, it will smear the royal family's face, and second, it will be hard to explain to the old city lord. The little Crown Princess said coldly, This is what you get for doing wrong. She only has herself to blame, so don't blame the heavens for being blind. If everyone is like her, relying on His Majesty and the Empress's power to snatch men and women from the common people, then how will the common people live? Will they still be able to live in peace? A man can't stand without integrity, and a country can't stand without integrity. If I were mother, I would throw this person to the city gate and whip her corpse for 3 days as a warning. The Empress suddenly widened her eyes. She now firmly believed His Majesty's words. No wonder His Majesty had a headache every time he saw his daughter-in-law. She was really a troublesome little girl. If anyone dares to use my name to do evil deeds outside, I will punish them and make sure that their entire family will have to bear the consequences. Let them know that it's not easy to be my relative. Crown Prince was speechless. The Empress, everyone was speechless. It was true. Being a relative of the little Crown Princess was never easy. Everyone knew that. Jojo. Empress Bai stuttered, the National Security Agency has indeed done wrong, but now she has only herself to blame for her own death. If we throw the corpse out and whip it, it's not very respectful to the corpse. Furthermore, Glory City would lose face. Prince Mo's mouth twitched. See, Imperial Mother is stuttering now. She's regretting it now. Previously, she had seriously called the husband and wife over to see if they had anything to do with this matter. She's unlucky. Empress Bai was extremely regretful. She hurriedly blinked her eyes and said, How about this? We'll do as the Crown Prince said, take away her title, and move her out of the capital for burial. What do you think? Chapter 5437. Imperial Mother, get someone to properly apologize to the families of the victims. Properly compensate them. Arbor looked deeply at the Empress. There are many things that cannot be compensated. The harm they suffered, the loss of dignity, these things cannot be compensated at all. Actually, people in high positions could not understand the suffering of the world at all. They were born with pride, coldness, and indifference. For example, the Empress and even Jojo's Lotus, in reality they could not truly understand the feeling of being locked up in a dark cellar, unable to cry out for help. Only those who had truly experienced it could clearly understand that feeling of despair, as well as the feeling of losing their dignity bit by bit. She did not blame them because no one could understand it all. From their point of view, those beautiful young men who had been imprisoned in the cellar had indeed suffered a little. But now that they had been rescued, all they needed to do was to compensate them. Generous compensation would make their lives easier in the future, and that would be a great favor from the imperial family. But in reality, once that kind of terrible damage was done, it was impossible to erase the psychological shadow. The Crown Prince was used to looking at his wife's expression. At this time, when he saw her depressed expression, his heart suddenly thumped. He quickly stepped forward to grab Arbor's little hand, and turned to the Empress to say in a low voice, Mother! The National Security Agency has simply disgraced you. Do you still want to protect her? It should be as Jojo said, throw her at the city gate and flog her for 3 days as a warning to others. In the future, let all the relatives of the imperial family be good people, and do not follow the example of the National Security Agency. This Crown Prince will not be merciful to any of them. What uncles, aunts, and concubines. As long as they dare to violate the laws of the country, oppress the common people, and fish in the countryside. They will all die. They must die. The Empress, son, you've fallen too quickly. Just now you said that you would seize the title of the National Security Agency and confiscate all the family assets, but you did not say that you would further flog the corpse. Who would have thought that in the next second, you would change your mind and support your wife's idea of flogging the corpse? For your wife, you really don't care about anything else. You can even raise your eyebrows at your mother? What's the point of me raising you? On the carriage back to the Eastern Palace, Missouri Lien looked at his wife sitting there listlessly without saying anything. His heart couldn't help but beat like a drum. He approached her and pulled her into his embrace, repeatedly calling out, "Chow chow chow chow, don't be angry, okay?" "Why would I be angry?" Arbor glanced at him and said in a mocking tone, "You people are born noble. How could you know how difficult life is? Compensation, compensation, compensation. The shattered dignity, the lost good times, could anything be compensated? What did they know about being locked up in a cellar where the sun couldn't shine on them?" Emolien's heart was beating wildly. He quickly hugged her and cried out, "Jojo, Jojo, you can't vent your anger on your husband. Your husband and I are on the same side. We are one. I will support you unconditionally. I will support you no matter what you do. Don't worry. In the future, if any of our relatives dare to step on my nose and do evil outside, no matter if they are uncles or aunts, this crown prince will not recognize them. You don't need to compromise on everything." Arbor impatiently threw away his hand. "You are the crown prince, you were born noble. Your mother is the empress and your father is the emperor." Chapter 54:38. You've never been locked up in a cellar before. It would be too much to ask you to understand how it felt. It's up to you whether to deal with it or not. You don't have to please me to make me happy. I'm not unhappy. Don't look for me about that woman in the future. I won't care. Your face is full of unhappiness. The more Emolien listened, the more flustered he became. She wasn't angry, she was furious. He thought about it and became more and more flustered. He could only use the stupidest method, which was to hold her tightly in his arms and kiss her. "I'll listen to you. Let that woman go up to the city tower tonight. Let everyone know that this woman only has herself to blame. She deserves to be punished." Arbor was annoyed by his tight embrace. She didn't manage to push his hand away twice. She glared at him. "You're sick." Emolien nodded repeatedly. As he nibbled on her, he whined pitifully, "Yes, I'm sick. I must take the antidote." Arbor rolled her eyes at him. She felt that her anger came out of nowhere. Jojo's lotus seemed a little unlucky and innocent. But it was probably the word cellar that triggered her nerves. Arbor thought, staying in that dark place all year round, hiding in a corner, having rats nibbling on her toes, she shuddered. Emolien immediately sensed it, and his arms tightened again, wrapping her tightly around him. "Don't be afraid, Jojo. Even if the sky falls and the earth shatters, I'll be by your side." Xiao Mu's heart softened when she saw that he was even more nervous than she was. A nameless fire came and left quickly, and she felt rather helpless as she looked at him. That was indeed the case. Why would she be angry at him for no reason? Jojo's lotus didn't know anything. How would she know that the word cellar could trigger her nerves? That night, the decree to strip the National Security Agency of his title came down. The National Security Agency's corpse was also hung up on the city tower. The crime of bullying the good and taking advantage of the good and handsome men was also clearly written down. Everyone spurned and cursed, and praised His Majesty and the Empress for being wise, and for not bending the law for favoritism. When the news reached the old king of Giant Pain's ears, the old man's body trembled. He immediately gave himself a thumbs up in his heart. When he heard the crown prince's words of not recognizing even his own family from the servants, he immediately discussed with his son for an entire night and decided to continue to close the doors and decline visitors. At this time, one must not provoke the crown prince. Who knew who would be the next unlucky one? See, the National Security Agency is in big trouble now. It was still their King Giant Pain's mansion that was wise. Long before the new year, they had closed their doors and refused to receive guests, squatting at home to count mushrooms. If he didn't see anyone, there wouldn't be any trouble, and he wouldn't be scolded by the crown prince and his wife. Wise, too wise. Look at what happened to the National Security Agency, and then look at himself. The old king of Giant Pain silently ordered his men to continue to close the door tightly. He wrote a memorial to be presented to the great emperor the next day, and once again asked for an illness to recuperate at home for a month. When the great emperor received the booklet from his old brother, he was so angry that he laughed. He didn't expect that this cowardly brother of his really had some foresight. When the crown prince's uncles, 7 aunts and 8 aunts heard the news and received the first-hand information, other than Prince Kong who laughed until he slapped his thigh, everyone else silently held a family meeting. They repeatedly warned the younger generation in the family not to court death. If they court death on the crown princess's head, they would really die. For 3 days in a row, the empress sent the head palace maid Pearl to deliver snacks to the young crown princess. Chapter 54:39. Only when she received her daughter-in-law's return gift 3 days later did she silently heave a sigh of relief. She turned around and angrily scolded the emperor. "Next time, don't make me go and find out what's going on. Look at what you've done. I already said, how can I touch the national security? It's not like I have nothing better to do. That day, I brought my daughter-in-law to destroy Zhaoguang's base. Are you stupid? You're always so suspicious, thinking that the young couple went to assassinate the national security. You even insisted that they go to the national security residence. If they didn't go, wouldn't it be fine? Look at how angry my father was. He went back to Glory City early this morning. Don't do it in the future." She had not been able to eat or sleep well for the past 3 days. The moment she closed her eyes, she would see her daughter-in-law looking at her coldly. She was afraid that her daughter-in-law would dislike her. Wouldn't she be wronged to death if that happened? The matter was caused by the emperor. The trouble was caused by the national security. What did it have to do with her? She was really wronged. She was on tenterhooks for several days and asked Pearl to plead for peace every day. Needless to say, when her daughter-in-law's expressionless face rose from the floor coldly, it made people's hearts in a mess. The emperor was angrily scolded by his daughter-in-law and vented all his anger on the courtiers. "In the future, don't casually find trouble with the crown princess. If something happens, no one can save you. Don't blame me for not informing you in advance. I can't save you either." The aggrieved courtiers, "Big brother, none of us provoked her. Wasn't this recruited by the national security of your family? What's going on? Big brother, you're the emperor. You have the final say. We know that you kowtowed to your daughter-in-law and were scolded by her. You're a pitiful man. We'll forgive you." Speaking of which, the courtiers had already seen the reality. Ever since General Zhong Li's family was transferred out of the capital and left the national political stage alone, didn't everyone know that the crown princess was not to be trifled with? Who would provoke that little fiend for no reason? They had warned their madams and misses 800 years ago not to court death. No one can save you if you court death. It rained this morning, but the weather began to clear up in the afternoon. Jojo sat by the window with Dolly in his arms. He flipped through the book in his hand listlessly. Emolien ran all the way in and saw her son lying quietly in her wife's arms. There was a suspicious glint at the corner of his mouth. Emolien quickly ran over and hugged Arbor. He lowered his head and kissed her on the forehead. "Jojo, did you miss your husband?" The past 2 days had been worrying him to death. For some reason Jojo did not like to talk much. It was as if he had returned to the way he was a few years ago. She would occasionally answer his questions, but most of the time she would be in a daze. This feeling of not being able to blend in with him made him panic for no reason. After hurriedly finishing up the matters at hand, the first thing Emolien did was come back to see Qiao Qiao. Arbor looked up and glanced at her. "Your grandfather returned to the glorious city this morning." Emolien's heart skipped a beat. She quickly nodded beside her and said, "Yes, yes, yes. What's wrong?" "Nothing. He's probably very angry with me," Arbor said lightly. "The old man is very angry about the national security incident." Emolien quickly sat up and took Arbor's little hand. She said softly, "Actually, the old man just can't swallow his pride. He's not angry with you." Chapter 54:40. After all, Madame Goen was considered a citizen of Glory City and was his adopted daughter. But now she was hung on the city gate in such a disgraceful way and was despised by thousands of people. The old Gramps would definitely lose face, so what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over, so he might as well return to Glory City. Arbor sneered and didn't reply. Emolien's heart was beating like a drum. He knew that the little fella had something to say about his grandfather, but he kept it in his heart. Furthermore, the old Gramps and Jojo didn't get along well when they first met. Now, because of Goen's matter, there was a thorn in his heart. Emolien hurriedly pulled Arbor's hand and said softly, "Jojo, if you're unhappy in your heart, just tell your husband." Arbor glanced at him and stood up with the baby in his arms. He faintly said, "I'm not unhappy." Goen was already dead and his corpse had been whipped for 3 days. What else could he do if he wasn't happy? Grind his bones to dust? What use would that be? At this moment, a figure flashed at the door and a stiff little face appeared at the door. Li Ye's expression was meticulous as she said in a methodical manner, "Crown Princess, this subordinate has already sent the medicine over according to your instructions. A total of 13 people. 11 of them took the medicine and their condition improved. The other 2 subordinates had already breathed their last when they went over and couldn't be saved. So his wife had secretly sent Li Yi to send the medicine to save those who were rescued from the cellar?" Emolien's heart thumped as he hurriedly looked at his wife's expression. However, he couldn't see anything from her ice-cold little face. There was no emotion or expression on his face. He just nodded indifferently. The crown prince now truly hated that damned Goen. So what if he died but he still left such a terrible mess there? It even caused his wife to look at them differently. It was as if he and his mother, Goen's nephew and sister, had all become Goen's accomplices. "Jojo." Emolien hurriedly reached out to pull her. Arbor, however, turned away with an indifferent expression. Holding the baby in his arms, he pushed aside the bead curtain and walked in. "I'm tired. I want to take a nap." Her voice drifted into his ears. Emolien immediately felt unwell. He didn't dare to follow her in, so he could only pace back and forth outside the beaded curtain. Through the curtain, he stared anxiously at the figure inside, his tears almost falling. Jojo ignored him. After a while, Emolien heard the sound of porcelain falling to the ground from the inside. His heart immediately clenched tightly, and even his breathing stopped for a moment. "Jojo." Emolien couldn't care less about making her angry. She quickly lifted the curtain and ran into the room. The room was silent and Jojo was nowhere to be seen. "Jojo." Emolien couldn't help but feel a little flustered. She quickly pinched the vine. Little ball. The vine didn't react at all. It seemed to have isolated him from the star field. "Little ball." Emolien was furious and angrily called out. Little ball was rather helpless. It wasn't that it didn't want to drag the great crown prince into the star field, but right now it couldn't do anything. The moment Master Silver entered the star field, the swaddling cloth wrapped around Little Ball suddenly flew into the air. God power surged in from all directions, shaking the entire star field until it became unstable. Arbor herself was a little dazed. She looked up at the sky in confusion. Right now her body was fixed in place and she couldn't move at all. She could only stare in shock at baby Mo who was floating in the air and waving its little arms and legs. Chapter 54-41. Wasn't her son's appearance too magical? Could it be that he was going to advance again? But wasn't his advancement speed a little too terrifying? He had only been born for a few days and he was going to advance for the second time in a row. What kind of abnormal physique was this? Arbor had a puzzled expression on her face as she stared at her son who was floating in the air without blinking. She could not make a sound for a long time. Chio Chio's earth-shattering voice suddenly rang in her ears. Master Silver, Master Silver? Baby Mo was really a pervert. Master Silver, I think our star domain seems to be transforming into the holy domain. Arbor blinked her eyes, thinking that she had heard wrongly. How was the holy domain possible? Wasn't the holy domain only able to transform into the holy domain when she broke through to the transcendent realm? Arbor's pupils suddenly constricted. Could it be that her son was going to break through to the transcendent realm? With such a fast advancement speed, would his small body succeed? Arbor looked at her son who was floating in the air worriedly. Chio Chio, can you stop him? Arbor asked hurriedly. This child had completely inherited her cultivation from the moment he was born. On the day he was born, he had advanced to level 10 God tier with her. This kind of existence that violated the heavenly rules, no wonder the heavenly Tao would be so angry. And now, if he broke through to the transcendent realm at such a young age, she wondered if the heavenly Tao would throw this kid into the holy domain that the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had mentioned in a fit of anger. It was said that the holy domain was far away from the Forgotten River. Without the heaven stairway, one could not go there on their own. The funniest thing was that it was said that the holy domain was a vast expanse of white. There was no food, no wine, nothing. Everyone in the holy domain should have broken through to the transcendent realm and been captured by the heavenly Tao to be centralized and cultivated. Therefore, when she summoned the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal from the holy domain, he stayed in her star domain and did not want to go back at all. Her son was still so young. What if he was teleported over by the crazy heavenly Tao? When Arbor thought of this, she could not help but shiver. Stop him, Chio Chio. We can't let him advance to the transcendent realm now. Master. Chio hurriedly comforted her. Don't worry. As long as you don't advance to the transcendent realm, baby Mo won't be able to enter the transcendent realm for the time being. But I feel that the realm in my body is loosening. I'm about to break through. Arbor said expressionlessly. Ever since she gave birth to the baby, Jojo realized that no matter how much she wandered around, it seemed that as long as her son advanced in level, she would be able to benefit from it as well. It seemed that they would advance at the same time. She didn't want to be so lazy, but there was nothing she could do about it. Chio hurriedly comforted her. Don't worry, master. Baby Mo had already advanced 2 levels previously. This time he shouldn't be able to advance by much. It's probably just a small level. He won't be able to jump out of the range of a level 10 god tier. Xiao Mu involuntarily knitted her brows when she heard this. Why was she so unconcerned? Looking at the surging momentum in front of him and the speed at which the divine power flowed, it did not look like he had only advanced by a small level and could not jump 10 levels. Baby Mo's advancement was really earth-shattering. If it was outside, all the cultivators in the capital would have been alarmed by this time. Fortunately, they were on Fish Orchid Planet. Other than them, no one else saw it. Otherwise, if they saw such a small baby advancing to above level 10 of the god tier. Chapter 54-42. He wondered what everyone would think of this. At the very least, most people would not be able to accept such a terrifying reality. On the vast sea surface, the wind and clouds were surging, and divine power was swirling. From time to time, fish heads would pop out from the bottom of the sea, leaping up in a light silver arc. Such a huge commotion on the sea surface had already caused the entire land sea to tremble. A huge land whale emerged from the depths of the sea, spitting saliva and looking at the sea surface with a pair of round eyes in astonishment. On an island, Holy Sun Mi Yen was playing chess with He Jietchen. His fingers that were pinching the chess piece suddenly stopped in midair. Other than his eyeballs that could move slightly, he discovered that his entire body and limbs could not move at all. Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at the man sitting in front of him. The fingers that Venerable Peach Blossom used to hold the teacup moved slightly, and he suddenly broke free from the restraint, letting out a long sigh of relief. That moment of delay made him feel as if his body was bound by the heavenly Tao, and he was almost unable to move. Are you all right? A certain Peach Blossom teased and looked at Holy Sun Mi Yen sitting opposite him, taking pleasure in his misfortune. Ayaya, what a strong restraining force. Even those below the divine venerable realm would be restrained. This fellow touched a sore spot and showed off in front of the immobile Holy Sun Mi Yen for a long time. Then he said, Ayaya, I have to go see my Charl. I don't know what my Charl is doing. Look, why is the star field so turbulent? As he spoke, the entire island rumbled, and the ground under his feet shook several times. Holy Sun Mi Yen gritted his teeth and stared gloomily at Venerable Peach Blossom, who was walking back and forth. This fellow was really asking for a beating. He looked a bit more repulsive than that little bastard Emolien. A certain Peach Blossom sat on the stone table, folded his slender legs, and poked the black-faced Holy Sun Mi Yen. I'm leaving. You stay here and be good. I won this game of chess. As he spoke, he deliberately used his black pieces to surround Mi Yan's white pieces. Then he tilted his head and looked at his masterpiece with great satisfaction. He won, and he won so beautifully, hee. Holy Sun Mi Yen, seeing him disappear from the island in a flash, Mi Yen could not help but roll her eyes. He was 100 years old, but his IQ was 0 years old. He couldn't even compare to baby Mo, who was just born a few days ago. He Chen's figure flashed, and when he appeared again, he was already standing beside Arbor. At this time, Xiaomu was standing there motionlessly like a wooden puppet. When she saw Rotten Peach Blossom appear next to her, her eyes involuntarily shifted as she cast him a glance. I am my Joe, you've been frozen. Are you tired? Do you want me to carry you to the side to sit for a while? Arbor glared at him with her beautiful black eyes. Don't think that just because this fellow was laughing, she couldn't hear the gloating in his laughter. Reverend Peach Blossom pursed his lips. When he turned his head, he saw baby Mo, who was enveloped in a myriad of streams of divine power, in midair. Baby Mo was currently wrapped in a small cocoon that was overflowing with light. One could only vaguely see 2 tiny hands poking out of the swaddling clothes. These tiny hands made a circle in the air, and they were contrasted by the sparkling and translucent halo. Reverend Peach Blossom stared for a while, then frowned and said softly, Jojo, is little Furball advancing again? Was there really no problem with this child advancing so quickly? Arbor continued to glare at him. Chapter 54-43. Hu Jinshin lowered his head to look at himself, then glanced at the little stoic's indignant expression. He couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Don't worry, Jojo. He probably can't break free for a while. I reckon that after Baby Mo completes his advancement, everyone will be able to move freely." Arbor naturally knew that everything would be fine after his son completed his advancement. She was just indignant. Humph, what right did a godly venerable realm cultivator have to stroll around outside? Right now, her star domain was slowly transforming into the holy domain. From the looks of it, it probably wouldn't be completed in a day or two. Didn't this mean that she would be stuck here like an idiot for several days and nights? This was simply preposterous. She was the omnipotent Jojo, the little master of the star domain. How could she be stuck here without being able to move? Sir Jojo struggled angrily, but he still couldn't break free of the binding force on him. She looked up and saw that the sea had regained its tranquility. The fish in the sea had all quieted down and didn't poke their heads out again. She couldn't help but feel a bit anxious. In her fit of anger just now, she carried the calligraphy treasure back to the star domain. Jojo's lotus was still pacing back and forth outside the palace. Her husband definitely couldn't enter the star domain now, so he was probably fretting and anxious. Who knew what kind of storm he would stir up? The little crown princess guess was right. The crown prince was already burning with anxiety and had nowhere to vent his irritable anger. He was practically about to flip the entire eastern palace upside down. For the past 3 days, the servants would make a detour whenever they saw the crown prince. No one dared to provoke the crown prince at this time. His Highness the Crown Prince was simply like a rampaging dragon these days. He disliked whoever he saw and attacked whoever he saw without exception. His Highness even had the underworld court guards investigate the family affairs of all his uncles, brothers, and aunts. After a round of investigation, he discovered that the second cousin of the Duke of Eternal Peace's concubine's brother was also an unruly person. 2 years ago he snatched a farmer's daughter and almost caused her death. The great crown prince finally found a way to vent his belly full of anger. Not only did he call the crown prince of the Eternal Peace Duke, Missouri Lu, he even ordered him to hand over the second cousin of the Eternal Peace Duke's concubine's brother to be dealt with within 3 days. This was simply too much. As a result, the entire imperial family was in a state of panic. The crown prince of the Eternal Peace Duke was innocent. Mo Lu returned home in tears with a dumbfounded look on his face, complaining to his father, the Duke of Eternal Peace. Who knew that he would be involved in such a shocking matter? The second cousin of the Duke of Eternal Peace's concubine's brother, this Mo Lu, was really a relative that was completely unrelated to him. If the crown prince was looking for the second cousin of his concubine's brother, then he could still accept it. In the end, the crown prince went to look for Mo Lu's father, the second cousin of the Duke of Eternal Peace's concubine's brother. The crown prince was too embarrassed to call his royal uncle over and reprimand him, so he vented his anger on his own brother. This is really too much. Mo Lu was depressed for 2 whole days. After going around in circles a few times, he finally dragged out that scourge of a second cousin brother and helped the crown prince vent his anger. This matter immediately aroused the vigilance of everyone both inside and outside the court, especially the imperial family and the relatives of the imperial family. Everyone began to investigate in a low-key manner, looking at everyone around them, including the aunts and aunts, to see if there was anyone unruly. Everyone knew that when the crown prince disregarded all his relatives, he would have no uncles, aunts, or uncles. Chapter 54-44. A distant relative of the Eternal Peace royal family had kidnapped a woman and treated human life like grass, causing the crown prince of Eternal Peace to be fined 6 months of his salary. The great emperor even went to look for the Eternal Peace royal family and secretly reprimanded him, throwing the title of being ignorant of people onto the Eternal Peace royal family's head. The Eternal Peace royal family was so angry that when he returned home, he immediately investigated all of his distant relatives. His face was ashen and he was unable to calm down for half a month. It was too fucking sullen. Who knew that a concubine's family, a distant relative, would be dug out by the crown prince and punished? How angry must the crown prince have been these past few days for him to do such a heinous thing? Arbor's days in the star field were not easy either. Rotten Peach Blossom kindly carried her to a peach tree and even got her a stool to sit on, improving her upright posture. It took the outside world 5 days to transform the star field into the Saint Field. The people and beasts in the star field were complaining incessantly in their hearts. Other than the hierarch realm, all the people and beasts were bound by the power of the star field and could not move. The anxious and frustrated mood at the beginning, after dozens of hours, everyone had no choice but to collectively accept their fate. They temporarily accepted the fact that they could not move, and could only calm their minds and silently cultivate. Rotten Peach Blossom pitied his Jojo, who did not eat or drink, so he came over to feed him every few days. Most of the time he was in a daze beside Jojo. Until 5 days later Mo Lien suddenly heard Chiochio's voice, and her expression changed slightly. At that time, he was angrily reprimanding a trembling official in the study when he suddenly stood up and asked the other party to leave. The unlucky official's legs were trembling, and he did not even know how he left the study. As soon as he left, he could not help but wipe his tears and go back gloomily. The moment Mo Lien stepped into the star field, she felt an indescribable sense of wonder. The aura in the entire star field was very fresh. The paradise planet in front of him seemed to have taken on a completely new look. It was full of vitality and prosperity. This change made everyone's eyes light up, and they felt indescribably happy. Crown Prince Mo's gloominess over the past few days was instantly swept away when he saw his wife meditating with her eyes closed under a peach tree. He quickly walked forward, but before he could reach his wife, he saw something fall from the sky. Mo Lien instinctively reached out to take it. She lowered her head and happened to meet Baby Mo's eyes. The little guy was wrapped in a dirty blanket. His phoenix eyes were slightly bright as he stared at him with great vigor. "What are you glaring at?" Crown Prince Mo glared back at him as a matter of course. Rotten Peach Blossom's cold laughter came from the side. "Yo, you finally came in. Quick, take a look and see if there are any changes to Paradise Planet." Naturally the changes were great. For example, the peach tree in front of him had grown thicker and stronger. The mountain range in the distance seemed to have been repainted with thick ink and heavy colors. It was so exuberant that it left one speechless. Vitality. The entire star field was full of vitality, as if someone had injected a trace of fresh life into it. The mountains and rivers in front of them had been reborn. The God domain has changed to the Saint domain. Mo Lien sighed in relief. For the past few days he had been restless, unable to eat or sleep. He had thought that Jojo did not want to talk to him, so he excluded him from the star field. Chapter 54-45. From the looks of it now, it was probably due to the sudden transformation of the star domain into the Saint domain that caused him to be unable to enter for the past few days. Jojo probably didn't even have time to react before the divine domain began to transform, and she couldn't contact him anymore. Thinking of this, Mo Lien couldn't help but calm down a little. He had been on tenterhooks for many days and he really couldn't eat or sleep well. His wife suddenly disappeared with the baby. It was really a scary thing. "Hey, do you want me to tell you? Why is this star domain transforming?" Venerable Peach Blossom flashed in front of him with a smile, revealing an expression of watching a good show as he looked him up and down. His voice was filled with schadenfreude. "Yo, Your Highness, the Crown Prince hasn't slept well these past few days." Looking at this haggard little face, it really made one's mood happy. Mo Lien glanced at him. I can't sleep well outside, but do you think you can sleep well inside?" Looking at this guy, it was obvious that he hadn't slept for a long time. His eyes were about to have dark circles. Did he think that no one could see it? Venerable Peach Blossom blinked his eyes. Seeing him float past him with Mo Bao in his arms, he couldn't help but snort. He really hadn't slept much during this period. If he wasn't staring at Jojo, he had to keep an eye on Mo Bao, that little ancestor. He was afraid that something would happen to the mother and son if they advanced too quickly. In the end, everything went smoothly. Mo Bao and his mother successfully reached the peak of level 12 of the divine domain. Just as they were about to break through to level 13, they stopped. Venerable Peach Blossom was already used to being provoked by Mo Bao. When he saw his realm soar, he just calmly glanced at him. The child's father had a calm expression on his face. Although he could sense that the child's realm had increased a lot as soon as he caught him, the child's father didn't say anything. They just looked at each other silently and glared at each other. Mo Bao spat out a mouthful of bubbles at his father with a look of disdain. His pair of phoenix eyes were dark, and the expression on his cute little face was wooden. On the other side, Arbor exited his cultivation state and found that he could move his hands and feet. Just as he was about to stand up, he heard Chiochio's noises from his conscious. Master, 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 master. You and baby Mo have both reached the pinnacle of level 12 god tier. Arbor's small face was expressionless. Didn't you say that Mo Bao, this child, would only advance in a small area at most, and wouldn't be able to jump out of the 10th level? How much of a scammer are you? That was why he could say such irresponsible words earlier. If it wasn't for rotten peach blossom suppressing him, Baby Mo would have probably become a level 13 god tier master without any hindrance. This speed of advancement was clearly much faster than his mother, his father, and anyone else in this world. As for his mother Jojo, she had borrowed her son's power to rapidly advance in rank more than once. Who would believe it? She didn't want to advance in rank so hastily, but her son's advancement was like picking up a cabbage. It was so fast that even Charles didn't want to look at it. Most importantly, if his son had advanced, then so be it. Why did he have to tell the Heavenly Tao that Jean City was a saint? Even the Heavenly Tao wouldn't believe it. This child was really too talented, Lord Jojo thought to herself. Chochio continued to make a ruckus. Master Silver, Chochio originally thought that since little Master Silver had just advanced a few days ago, logically speaking, it was indeed impossible for him to advance so quickly again. Chapter 54-46. Moreover, Masta hasn't had any fortuitous encounters and hasn't been cultivating properly. Reality has proven that everything in this world really doesn't make sense. Little Masta's abnormality may be several times higher than yours, Masta. Arbor, why did these words sound so awkward? Alright, stop spouting nonsense. Xiao Mu grumpily rebuked Chochio. Can you sense how the little dumpling's body is doing? Very good. Chochio hurriedly said, Masta, you don't have to worry. Little Masta's body has already entered the range of the immortal bone. Arbor, pretend she didn't ask. Masta, Chochio has another peerless piece of good news for you. Arbor was expressionless as she coldly responded with an "oh" in her conscience. The sapling immediately couldn't take it anymore and jumped up and down, shouting, Masta, your attitude isn't right. Masta. Chochio said he has a peerless piece of good news for you. You should at least show some excitement. Look at you now, you're actually completely indifferent after hearing such good news. Masta, what exactly are you thinking, Masta? Hurry up and say it, Arbor snapped back. If you don't say it, I'm leaving my conscience right now. Now, she could see a little tree ant standing on the luxuriant sacred tree in her Dantian star region, waving its branches as it smiled brightly at her. That silly look was simply unbearable to look at. Arbor looked at it speechlessly. Are you going to say it or not? The sapling angrily waved its branches. Masta, I was just about to say it, don't interrupt. Arbor was so angry that she laughed. Without waiting for her to shout, Chochio hurriedly said, Masta, I actually have two pieces of news for you. One is a peerless piece of good news. The other isn't so good. Which one do you want to hear first? This noisy and troublesome tree was long-winded and liked to keep her in suspense. Arbor simply reached out and pulled it out of the star region, lifting it onto her palm. She opened her eyes and stared coldly at the little tree in her palm. In the blink of an eye, Chochio seemed to see stars flickering in and out of her tranquil and boundless eyes. Chochio's heart could not help but skip a beat. The moment he opened his mouth, he could not help but stutter. Master, are you about to break through to the transcendent god realm? Masta's eyes seemed to contain the power of thousands of stars, as if she was about to break through to the saint level. Arbor glanced at him and said calmly, not so fast. How could it be so easy to break through to the transcendent god realm? The little tree only knew how to make wild guesses. Tell me your good news and bad news, Arbor said faintly, not noticing the two men standing not far from the mahogany tree and looking at her. She was curious and focused all her attention on the tiny tray ant in her hand. What are you waiting for? The little tray ant hurriedly nodded and stammered, Master. Let me tell you the good news first. The good news is that I have another bone-forging pill of a higher grade. This time you can turn your newly entered god bone into a saint bone in one go. If it was a saint bone, then no one below the holy venerable realm would be able to hurt little Masta. Arbor raised her eyebrows in surprise and thought for a while before nodding. What kind of price do I have to pay? Xiao was very clear that little tree, this deceitful fellow, had first strongly promoted the benefits to her. I'm so sleepy. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Chapter 54-47. In order to obtain a powerful ability, one had to pay a corresponding price. Seeing her calm expression, the little Trent's heart trembled and it hurriedly explained the rest of its words. Yes, it does hurt a little. And in the initial stages, it will be a little miserable. Arbor raised her eyebrows and waited for this fellow to continue. The little tray ant continued to blabber. It's that to obtain a new divine bone you have to reforge all your bones. Before forging, the little tree's face was full of guilt, and its voice became lower and lower. It's best if your whole body coughs, your bones are cracked. Break all your bones and then get a new life. Ah yes, it does hurt a little. You may not be able to move in the short term. But master, if you can endure this pain, after taking that saint-level bone-forging pill, you will be able to endure it. In the future, it will be hard for you to find a match below the divine venerate level. Just as the little tree finished speaking, it realized that the little master in front of it seemed to be off all over. Jojo's head was covered in cold sweat, and her gaze was a little dazed. It seemed that her body was actually trembling slightly. The little treant was a little panicked and hurriedly waved its hands. Master, don't panic. Don't be afraid. If you don't want to eat this bone-forging pill, we won't eat it. The moment it finished speaking, it felt its little body being sent flying by a punch. It cried out in shock as it was thrown in an arc in midair and was instantly thrown far away. Emolien strode forward and hugged Arbor in his arms. He lowered his head and looked at her worriedly. He patted her back lightly and said in a low voice, Jojo? Don't be afraid, don't listen to the little tree's nonsense. We won't eat that pill. Arbor came back to her senses and realized that she was covered in cold sweat. She was instantly depressed. She couldn't help but clench her fists tightly and pursed her lips, not saying anything for a long time. He didn't expect that after so long, his mental fortitude was still so weak. Just hearing the sapling talking about breaking all the bones in her body made her think of the days when all her limbs were broken and she crawled around like a pitiful little worm. He broke out in a cold sweat for no reason. This terrifying psychological illness had never been cured, but she had ruthlessly buried it in the darkest corner of her heart. Occasionally, after tearing it open, he would still feel a bone-piercing pain. Holding the expressionless baby Mo in his arms, Venerable Peach Blossom stepped forward and urged with a frown, Emolien, help her up and sit over there. Emolien helped her up and walked to the stone table at the side to sit down. He stroked her sweaty forehead and said softly, Jojo, don't panic. It's okay. Don't listen to the little tree's nonsense, just ignore it. Ichin nodded. Suddenly, he felt the little ancestor in his arms move. He looked down and saw the little child leaping into the air and floating in front of his mother. Then he suddenly fell down. Emolien moved his body slightly to the side, and the little child landed between the two of them, obediently lying on Arbor's lap. Arbor reached out to touch his little hand instinctively. She blinked and pulled the blanket off her son's body in disdain. She scolded her husband as usual. Your son is so dirty. The blanket is so dirty. Don't you know how to change it for him? Emolien looked at his wife pitifully. Chapter 54-48. Wife, please be reasonable. I've only seen my son for a few minutes and he looks so dirty. Is it because of me? Arbor glared at him in annoyance. Hurry and change. Hushurchin nodded in agreement and did not hesitate to add insult to injury. That's right. You don't know how to be a father at all. Emolien pitifully reached out to take the dirty calligraphy. Couldn't her son be a normal baby? He could make himself look so dirty just by staying in the star domain. Who knew what he had been doing all this time? His fingers had just touched the little ancestor's swaddling clothes. Who would have thought that a fair hand would reach out from the side and slap his hand away? Look at how clumsy you are. Let me do it. Hushurchin glanced at him and reached out to pick up the expressionless baby Mo. She turned to leave with a smile. To their surprise, as soon as they turned around, they saw Holy Sun Mi Yen standing not far behind them. His tattered clothes were full of holes, and he was staring at them with resentment in his small eyes. Hushurchin chuckled and said, oh damn. Where did this big beggar come from? All right. Let's go. I'm in a good mood today. I'll help you change your clothes too. Baby Mo waved his little hand unhappily. Hushurchin smiled and held him back. All right, little dumpling. Just take it that you're pitying your father. Your father has been on tenterhooks outside these days. He can't eat or sleep well. It's really tragic. Most importantly, Jojo's mood really needed someone to comfort him. Emolien looked up and held Arbor's hand. She said softly, Jojo, are you feeling better now? Arbor had already adjusted himself. It was mainly because Chiochio's suggestion just now caught her off guard and scared her. Thinking about it again, was she really that weak? Of course not. The past was the past. The present was the present. That bone-forging pill did indeed make her recall the difficult times of the past. However, those were all in the past. If she wanted to further refine her body, she might consider the bone-forging pill. However, it seemed that as long as she thought about the pain of having her bones broken, her body would still tremble uncontrollably. Emolien held her hand tightly and sat close to her. She looked down at her and said, "Jojo? Don't think about the past." Arbor shook his head and looked up at him with a determined gaze. "The harder it is, the more you have to overcome it. I shouldn't let the fear in my subconscious grasp me." Only by resolutely overcoming it could he break through the last demonic barrier in his heart. Emolien couldn't help but be startled. She sighed softly and said, "All right, whatever you want to do, I will support you. I will always accompany you and help you." The little stoic clearly didn't need to be so difficult. Now she clearly had everything she needed. Her star domain had also transformed into a saint domain. She didn't lack anything in her saint domain. In fact, she didn't need to work hard at all. However, Jojo said that the more difficult it was, the more they had to overcome it. Emolien's heart was filled with emotion. "Jojo." He reached out and gently stroked her hair. "Don't be angry with me anymore, all right? These few days were truly too unbearable. Especially after Jojo returned to the star domain without a word and didn't come out again." The crown prince felt that the sky was really about to collapse. Arbor also felt a bit embarrassed. That day she only wanted to return to the star domain to calm down a little. She didn't expect the little dumpling to be so deceptive. Chapter 54-49. Now that she thought about it, she indeed shouldn't have made Jojo's lotus worry for so long for no reason. When she thought of this, the little stoic couldn't resist raising her hand to stroke her husband's slightly haggard handsome face. Actually, I'm not angry at you. It was just that when she thought of the National Security Agency's actions, she felt a little angry, but actually, the National Security Agency's matter really had nothing to do with the Crown Prince. The two of them didn't have a good relationship, and to be honest, they had fallen out more than once. If she took her anger out on Jojo's lotus because of the National Security Agency's matter, Jojo would feel wrong just by thinking about it. When Emolien saw that her expression had eased, the huge rock that had been weighing on his heart finally settled down steadily. He hastily pulled her into his embrace and lowered his head to rub against her head. "Jojo, don't ignore me when you're angry in the future, okay?" Arbor couldn't resist rolling her eyes at him. Who could maintain a good mood when they were angry? "Don't worry, something like the National Security Agency won't happen again in the future," Emolien said to her with certainty. "When you weren't around, I fiercely taught everyone around me a lesson. I guarantee that they won't dare to make the same mistake again for the next 8 to 10 years. Arbor blinked her eyes. She seemed to have picked up on something from Jojo's lotus's words. It seemed like everyone around Jojo's lotus didn't have a good time when she wasn't around. Was she imagining things, or was this the truth? "What did you do?" Arbor couldn't help but ask curiously. Jojo's lotus should be quite anxious recently, and the people around him probably didn't have a good time either. When Arbor thought of this, she couldn't conceal her curiosity and pretended to ask nonchalantly, "Jojo's lotus, could it be that you laid your hands on your uncles and brothers?" "Laid my hands on what?" Emolien shook his head calmly and said, "How could that be? I was very polite to them. It's just that something happened to Malyo's family, so I punished him according to the nation's laws and family rules. He is very grateful to me." Xiao Mu blinked, only feeling that this sentence sounded awkward no matter how she heard it. He felt that after he dealt with Brother Emo and Brother Lu, they were quite grateful to him. Emolien saw the look of disbelief on her face and hurriedly said, "It's true. His distant cousin was found out by me and I punished him to teach his family a lesson. Naturally he will be grateful to me. Their whole family will remember my kindness." "Is that so?" Arbor silently glanced at his husband and suppressed the smile on his lips. Wasn't her husband venting his anger on her? It was a pity that Emo Lu's family was mercilessly insulted by the Crown Prince. However, it was their family's bad luck. If they hadn't done anything wrong, they wouldn't have been scolded. Arbor snorted and threw the matter of the Emo Lu family to the back of his mind. Grasping his palm with her small hand, Xiao Mu looked at him and said, "Xiao Xiao's Lian, I was in the wrong this time. I shouldn't have taken my anger out on you about the national security incident, and I shouldn't have returned to the Star Region without saying goodbye. It's just that after that, the Star Region's sudden advancement was actually your son's fault. This has nothing to do with me." When it came to the ability to shift the blame, if Jojo claimed to be second, no one would dare to claim to be first. This guy didn't hesitate to shift the blame to his son. His conscience didn't hurt at all. Looking at her little mouth smacking, saying how his son had tricked him and how he had started advancing the moment he entered the Star Region. Chapter 54-51. When she saw this familiar figure, her heart couldn't stop pounding madly. The little stoic thought she was seeing things and hastily rubbed her eyes. Qiuqiu rolled to her side at some point and excitedly exclaimed, "Master, Master, Master, Xiaotuanzi is truly too amazing. You don't know, but when he leaped into the air just now, he gathered more than half of Fish Orchid Planet's sacred energy and then." Arbor couldn't hear Qiuqiu's blabbering anymore. Right now, she only had that familiar figure in her eyes, and her breathing couldn't help but stop. That person seemed to have realized something and abruptly turned around. She was holding a small swaddle in her arms and looked at her with a gentle gaze. A gentle smile slid across her exquisite features. His entire person was like a lively scroll painting, suddenly leaping into her eyes. Just like several years ago, that person leaned against the window and slowly turned around, her eyes extremely enchanting and charming. Just like back then, she tilted her head and waved her hand at her with a grin. "Disciple, Master has come to disturb you." Nothing had changed. Everything seemed to be the same as before. Arbor stood there in a daze, unable to say anything for a long time. Until Murong Sun tilted her head and smiled at her. Murong Sun held the baby in one hand and spread out her other hand as she said to her with a grin, "Aya, disciple, long time no see. I didn't expect you to be married and have a child already. When Master saw my little grand disciple's stoic face, my intuition told me it was your baby, haha. You still have the cheek to laugh at you." Arbor fiercely glared at her before dashing over and crashing into her arms. "Murong Sun, you damn liar. Unfilial disciple." Peak Master Murong pursed her lips and tapped her youngest disciple's head, her eyes sparkling. "Don't you know how to say something nice to make Master happy?" Arbor hugged her back and grumbled, "Damn liar, you missed the coming-of-age ceremony and also the wedding. Now you can only attend my child's 1-month-old celebration." Murong Sun beamed with joy and hugged Arbor with one hand. "Excellent, excellent. Master will definitely attend my little grand disciple's 1-month-old celebration." She patted Arbor's head with a smile and murmured, "Disciple, Master has troubled you endlessly these years. It's been hard on you." Murong Sun couldn't be clearer about her situation back then. He was originally a dead man who couldn't be more dead. Why was he standing here now? How could the dangers and difficulties of this be covered in just a few words? Her youngest disciple must have traveled thousands of miles and went through endless hardships to save her. Master Murong Sun's head, Murong Sun's Esistimurong, as Lil, unfilial disciple. Her master had just woken up, yet she was beating and scolding her. She even called her a damn liar. She was simply a little bastard. Chiao Mu sniffed. "I wasn't the one who saved you in the beginning. It was that guy Yin Fei. However, it's also because of him that good things are strewn with setbacks. It's a long story, so I'll have Emolian tell you when we have time." Peak Master Murong glared at the back of her disciple's head and felt a bit irritated. This unfilial disciple still looked like she was on the verge of death after saying more than 3 sentences. "Master." Arbor turned around and clenched her fists. "Your cultivation." Murong Sun spread her hands and looked at herself. Chapter 54-52. She shook her arm and used her original spiritual energy, but she was unperturbed after discovering nothing. She lowered her head and met Baby Mo's eyes before giggling mischievously at the stoic child. The other party's 2 black eyes were unmoving and fixated on her like this, making her inexplicably feel that her smile just now seemed a bit stupid. Why didn't this grand disciple learn anything else and copy his mother's stoic face? Children should be cute and adorable when their heads are round. Don't learn from your mother and pull a long face all the time. "Master." Arbor turned around and angrily called out. She was talking to her about serious matters, but this fool started to be mischievous again. Murong Sun responded and walked up. She reached out to stroke Arbor's head. "Disciple, what are you thinking about? You can't be thinking that Master will blame you for losing her cultivation, right? Look, Master is someone who has lived a new life, so what is there that I can't accept?" Murong Sun peered at her little disciple standing in front of her, her gaze landing on that unchanging stoic face, and her hands involuntarily itched. She reached over and pinched her disciple. "You're not cute at all. Hurry and stop pulling a long face. Your master walked around the gates of hell and came back, so why don't you show me a smile?" Arbor glared at her several times and brusquely slapped her hand away. "I'm talking to you about serious matters. Isn't it just the loss of your cultivation?" Murong Sun waved her hand nonchalantly. "You can cultivate again if it's gone. Think about how your master, me, is a stunningly talented person, so how could I be defeated by a trifling obstacle in front of me? Arbor felt that Peak Master Morong, who used to be so stunning and peerless, might not be able to withstand the blow of becoming a cripple. She hastily strode forward and nodded, an extremely serious expression appearing on her stoic face. Master, your foundation is still there. I have a bloodshed vermilion fruit here, so eat it. Perhaps you can comprehend a spiritual root again. Okay. Disciple, don't worry about this for now. Master has something to talk to you about. Morong Sun pulled her little disciple's hand and earnestly said as they walked, Disciple, do you know how Master woke up? Master woke up when my star domain transformed into the holy domain. No. Morong Sun shook her head at her. When I opened my eyes, I saw my grand disciple in front of me. I think this little fellow kissed me. When Morong Sun saw her little disciple looking at her strangely, she coughed lightly and hastily said, I'm saying that this little fellow might be an apothecary. At that time, I felt a mouthful of medicinal power enter my mouth. Xiao Mu abruptly widened her eyes and abruptly lowered her head to look at her son, who was expressionlessly looking at them in Morong Sun's arms. Master, Morong Sun, Master Morong, Master, Morong Master, Morong. When Morong Sun returned to her senses, she discovered that her little disciple had snatched her grand disciple away in a fluster. Her lips twitched uncontrollably, and she watched as her little disciple disappeared in front of her with the child in her arms. Her noisy shouts still lingered in the air. Emolien. Oh no, your son has inherited your apothecary skills. Hurry and come back to block the lightning. Heavenly law definitely would not let this heaven-defying child go, so it was time for the child's father to perform. Morong Sun was dumbfounded. Chapter 54-53. She truly couldn't understand what her disciple meant by calling the crown prince back to block the lightning. Why did he change so much these days when she wasn't around? She simply couldn't keep up with her little disciple's jumpy train of thought. She strolled around the vicinity and couldn't help but click her tongue in wonder. When she picked up a disciple in Shizhou City back then, she had long known that he was a little nouveau riche. Seeing him today, she couldn't help but feel that her knowledge of her disciple back then was still too shallow. Arbor hopped out to look for her husband with her ink treasure in her arms, but she couldn't find him after looking around. Instead, that anxious roar called Saichi and Kaishio over. When they saw her anxious appearance, they hastily went up and said, Crown Princess, did you forget? Today, His Highness the Crown Prince said that he will go to the Ministry of Justice's dungeon to interrogate City Lord Mu and his disciple, Gu Yishuan, after court. He reckons that he won't be back until later. Xiao Mu patted her small head lightly. It seemed like her husband had mentioned it to her yesterday. However, she was in a daze at that time, so how could she have thought about it so much? She looked amiably at Saichi and Kaishio. Then you two go busy yourselves. It was truly regretful that her husband wasn't in the Eastern Palace, so she couldn't find him to block the lightning for her son. She lowered her head to glance at the expressionless baby Mo and couldn't resist curling her lips at him. The latter's beady black eyes stared straight at her with sparkling eyes. His little appearance was so adorable that it melted her heart. When Arbor recalled how her husband disdained her son for being ugly yesterday, she couldn't resist pursing her small lips. How was her little baby ugly? He truly had no taste. He was so beautiful and adorable. When he grew up, he would definitely be the most beautiful baby in the world. Son, don't disappoint me. The little stoic grasped her son's small paw and mumbled to him, In the future, you must grow prettier than Daddy and mock him instead. The little fellow opened his mouth and yawned. The little stoic's eyes curved into crescents. Baby Mo was really adorable. She really wanted to poke him, but when she recalled how soft this child's entire body was, Sir Jojo restrained himself and withdrew his restless hand. When you grow up a little more, Mother will bring you out to gain experience. We will travel all over the 3 continents and the Sea of Forgetfulness. Arbor paced back and forth in the bedroom with his son in his arms for a while. Suddenly he stopped and hurriedly flashed back into the star field. Just now, she had been so focused on finding her husband to block the lightning that she had thrown her master into the star domain. At this moment, he suddenly remembered and hurriedly ran in to look for his master. Master. The little stoic didn't find her master on Peach Blossom Slope, so she hastily used her divine perception to search the star domain. Finally, under a peach tree, she saw Morong Sun sleeping soundly while leaning against a tree branch. The little stoic jumped in fright and hastily walked over. She reflexively reached out to check if she was breathing. Who would have thought that Murong-sun would grab her hand before it could even touch her? He opened his eyes and grinned at her, his eyes sparkling. Aya, my little disciple, don't tell me you think that your master is lying here dead? Bah. Arbor wanted to spit on her face. Don't worry. Murong-sun stretched and stood up. She raised her hand to pat the little stoic's head. I promise to let you take care of me for the rest of my life. Master definitely won't go back on her word. The little stoic's eyes reddened and she glared at her several times, both annoyed and amused. This master of hers had never been proper. Every time she spoke, she would tease her. She didn't know which words were true and which were false. Chapter 54-54. Disciple, don't worry about Master. Although Master doesn't have any cultivation, Master can sense that Master's body has recovered quite well. Arbor nodded and took out 3 fruits of different sizes in one go, stuffing them all into Murong-sun's hands. Master, the flesh of the bloodshed vermilion fruit can improve one's constitution and prolong one's life. The biggest use of the core inside is to help people comprehend their spirit roots. Eat this first. Murong-sun lowered her head with a smile and glanced at the small fruit that glowed with a red light amidst the green color. She nodded repeatedly. Not only can the longevity fruit increase one's lifespan, but it can also rejuvenate one's youth and restore one's youthful appearance. It has the ability to retain one's youthful appearance. Arbor glanced at Murong-sun's unchanged appearance and pursed his lips. Master, you don't need to recover your appearance. Murong-sun was overjoyed when she heard this and touched her face before touching her little disciple's face. She laughed indecently and said, I didn't expect Master to have the ability to retain one's youthful appearance after sleeping for so long. Ha! As expected, it's hard to abandon one's natural beauty. Arbor, Master, can you be any more shameless? Murong-sun simply ignored her and stuffed another green fruit with a furry shell into her hands. This is a holy fruit. Take it, Master. She paused and suddenly asked dejectedly, Does Master not have an inner world now? How is that possible? Murong-sun flicked her little head. What are you thinking about? Master's cultivation base has only dropped. It's not like I've lost all of my divine sense. Don't worry with your Master's aptitude and ability. It won't take long even if I start learning from scratch and start from the mystic realm all the way up. After saying this, she accepted the 3 fruits with a smile and put them into her inner world before glancing at her little disciple with a chuckle. The little stoic's eyes brightened. Really, Master? Nonsense, why would Master lie to you? It's not the first time you've lied to me. Murong-sun rubbed her nose guiltily and earnestly said to the little stoic, Good child, don't worry. Master won't lie to you in the future. Arbor's dejected mood slightly improved. Since Master could still use her inner world, it meant that at least she didn't start from scratch. If her divine sense was still intact, it should be relatively easy for her to slowly recover her cultivation in the future. Thinking of this, Arbor couldn't help but feel happy. Master. She tilted her head and said, Did you know? I found a place with good feng shui in the Divine Province and built our holy water sect there. Do you want to go back and take a look? Murong-sun's fingers tightened, and she abruptly looked up at her youngest disciple, excitement in her voice. Really? Arbor nodded vigorously. Murong-sun hastily ran up to her and pulled her hand. Traitorous disciple, you're only telling Master about such an important matter now. Then what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Arbor couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and grabbed her. You just woke up. You need to recover well. Don't go anywhere for a while. Rest well and cultivate in our star field. As for second martial uncle and senior sister, don't worry. I've already sent them a message and told them to attend the 1-month-old celebration for the calligraphy treasure. They'll probably arrive in 2 days at the latest. Arbor's eyes brightened. Master, everyone will gather in Dragon Flame City very soon. She hadn't told second martial uncle and senior sister about her master waking up. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.